home and not in person. We are excited to be here and to be able to learn what everybody has been up to this summer. So thanks for joining us. I'm Allie Bayless. I'm the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center Outreach and Education Coordinator. And I'll be moderating this first session along with Celeste Hanley, who will be our amazing timekeeper, which is the toughest job, trying to keep us on schedule. So thank you in advance for that, Celeste. And I just wanted to go over a few house rules before we kick things off. First of all, you are being recorded, so just a heads up. On that note, we would love for people to keep their videos on whenever possible. I realize some situations you cannot have your video on, but if possible, please have them on, because as a presenter, it really helps to make sure people feel supported and that they're actually speaking to an audience. So we do ask that you turn those on if possible. And on that note, please be sure to mute yourself if you're not presenting. We don't want to end up with a bunch of background noise as people are presenting, so be sure to keep yourself muted. And we will have opportunity for questions, but we ask that you chat your questions. So we'll have you chat those questions into the chat box, and then the moderator will relay the questions to the presenter. Once the presentation is complete, we'll have time for that. And also a note to the presenters, you're going to have a message coming to you when you have 1 minute left for your presentation. And then there'll be an alarm going off when you are out of time. So when you hear that alarm, it's a good time to try to wrap things up. We really want to stay on schedule as much as possible. So we do ask that you try to adhere to that as much as possible. All right, and also Don Kobayashi is also helping us out today. He's going to, or he just did throw the agenda into the chat, so feel free to take a look at that. We're going to get started a little bit later with our first talk, just to shift things in the schedule, but everything else will remain the same. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to our Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center Director, Mike Seki, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Allie, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to this year's version of the Noaa Intern Symposium. I don't know, somebody would have to help me how many years, but I believe it's over 10 years, easy, and it's been a great endeavor. We at the Fishery Science Center. By the way, I am Mike Seki. I'm the director for the Science Center. We take a lot of pride in developing young folks and to get them interested in science, number one, but also as for people to learn about Noaa and to become intimate with what we do, not just the Science Center, but across the agency. I did want to start by thanking the Noaa committee. I'm not going to name names because I'm going to miss somebody, so and it spans beyond the Science Center, and for those across the other lines and across Noaa, it's a lot of work. Even if it's a virtual, it's still a bit of organization to kind of put something like this on. And there's many mentors across all of the lines, and I want to thank the mentors for which an intern program would never really exist. It's an important piece of what each of these scientists do, and these other folks in Noaa to kind of provide the opportunities and interesting projects for all of you to participate in. And looking at the topics that are covered, they've done really an incredible job. I do want to thank all of you for taking part in the summer program. It's as I said, I think it's an awesome opportunity, and I just hope that you folks enjoyed the engagement and you had a very positive experience, and hope this triggers an interest to maybe a future career in Noaa. It's something that is the intent for a lot of these outreach activities and opportunities to kind of to get folks engaged and wanting to come and work for really the best agency in the federal government. Last but not least, I wanted to thank Simar. They're our partners who help us support at least the PISO piece of it. And they've been great partners to help continue to support the summer intern programs that I think has such a brings a big value to kind of younger folks and getting them engaged with what we need to move the science forward. Today, I hope to take as many of the talks in as I can. Like I said, it's the agenda is awesome. I do need to step away for a little bit, but my intent is to try and take in as many as I can. So look forward to that. And again, thanks for your efforts. Thanks for your engagement. Thanks for doing this. This is great. I think giving the talk is a big part of what it all comes out to be. So I look forward to hearing what you folks have to say. So have at it. I'm not going to babble on any more than that. And great to see you all.
Thank you so much for kicking things off, Mike. We really appreciate it. And we're going to kick it over to Don Kobayashi now just to give a little brief overview of how our internships have gone over the years. So Don, I'll have you go ahead and present.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. I'm going to test my tech knowledge here and try to share my screen. Stand by. I have to try to set a good example because the interns have to get it better than I'm doing. So hopefully you can hear me and maybe you can even see me off in the corner there. That's our intent today, is to get presenters to show themselves on the screen. And thanks, Mike, for leaving me to try to name the committee members for this summer. And I've probably forgotten somebody. So apologies in advance if I did forget anyone. I want to thank Ali, Pua, Celeste, Leon, Beth, Kimberly, and Sarah. Some of them will be playing major roles today during the symposium, but they've also helped a lot for other events we've had this summer for the interns. And I would like to say that next Wednesday, I'm trying to mobilize one for grad program overview. So in Hawaii, we have several universities that have graduate programs in the marine sciences. And last year we had a small workshop where representatives from each of those programs give us a short overview of what they could offer. So we're trying to mobilize that for next week. So stand by for emails on that. And a little bit of history on the symposium. We started this in around 2010. At least that's when we started tracking it. We were a little late getting into the intern game as we started to become a center and start to look maybe more nationally. And we started with 3 interns in 2010, and over the next 3 years we grew. And I think it was in 2013 or so, I said to Jeff Hare, hey, look at this interesting trend we've got going here. And being a biologist who likes to dangerously dabble in models, I told Jeff Hare, wow, look, we have this really cool fit to exponential growth going on. And this is going to tell us a lot about what to expect in the future. And I said, you know, by 2025, we might have over 200 interns participating in our summer symposia. So I told Jeff, no, you're not going to need a bigger boat, but need a bigger room. For those of you, and I think everyone is too young to recognize what this is from, but it's a pretty interesting movie. You should check it out. It's about a giant shark. We'll hear more about sharks today from Juliana, but check out this movie. It's called Jaws, and they needed a bigger boat. We need a bigger room. Back to the exponential growth model. As with most ecological or biological models, we didn't quite live up to expectations. Here's what reality showed over the subsequent years. And you can see that we didn't quite reach the exponential growth phase. We didn't even, well, we sort of asymptoted out, which was an interesting observation. And Paulo Marine did note that, I think it was around 2016 or 17, he said, we're at carrying capacity. So we have a certain number of mentors, we have a certain number of projects, certain number of staff. We're at carrying capacity. And of course, COVID made us dip in 2020. In 2021, we had a surge, but we're not really riding that surge anymore. Ali said I shouldn't joke about this, but I'm going to attribute it to monkeypox. So that's why we're dipped a little in 2022. And I think that's all I have. Ali, I'm going to turn it back over to you and stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Don, for that overview. I think it's really cool to see just kind of how things have grown over the years, and carrying capacity is a good place to be. I think that's kind of like what we can handle. And it's just nice every year to hear from our interns and see what everybody's been up to. This is something I look forward to every year. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Just another reminder for those of you that jumped on a little bit later, I saw like the numbers go up quite a bit after I did my announcements. Our presentations we're not taking actual unmuted questions, but if you can throw your questions in the chat, I will relay them to our presenters once they wrap things up and they have time for questions. So feel free to throw questions in the chat. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first talk from Rosie Bailey. She's a hauling scholar, and she's going to be telling the climate story through data visualization. So she'll be our first presenter today, and I'll just pass it over to you, Rosie.
Ali, can you indicate when you were able to hear Rosie? We're working out some audio issues.
Okay, I cannot hear her.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
So my computer doesn't actually work with the putting your face in front of the presentation. So I will just give my presentation on my roommate's computer.
Okay, that's fine. Are you able to share your presentation?
Yes.
Great.
Now, how do you put your face on the presentation?
Don't worry about it too much, Rosie. If you want to just get going, that's fine. There, it looks great.
All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Rosie Bailey. I'm from the University of Rhode Island, and I'm currently majoring in marine biology. This summer, I worked with Leanne Geschwind through OCAO to tell a climate story with data visualization on the science on the sphere, and our Noaa mission was Engagement Enterprise. When I started this internship, I had no idea which aspect of climate change story I'd be telling in Hawaii. I did know that my goal was to share as much information about the climate change story with the Hawaiian community as possible. In order to do that, I created some objectives for this project, which include to teach students and families about their changing environment, to spread awareness about climate change globally, to provide educators with learning materials, to utilize the science on a sphere for global visualization, and to develop skills in educational outreach. On the left, you can see an example of an animation I made that explains thermal expansion. And on the right here, you can see a diagram that I made that explains albedo and compares the UV reflectance rates of ice versus land. Before I explain what I created, it is important to give some background information about the science on a sphere. So what is a science on a sphere? The science on a sphere is a 6-foot globe that creates a 360-degree image with 4 projectors that blend together. How many are there? There are 177 globes installed in 22 countries and across 33 states in the US. What does SOS do? The science on a sphere projects any 360 or global image that illustrates Earth science. There are over 550 datasets, which include 45 real-time datasets and now a few that I have made. A real-time dataset is a dataset that takes in data every 1 to 3 hours and displays a change through time. Some examples would be precipitation or other weather patterns such as coral bleaching warnings. On the top right, you can see the SOS at the IRC, which is downstairs behind the security desk. And right behind me here, you can see a frame shot of a dataset that I used in one of my presentations. This is a future sea surface temperature scenario based on data from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And this scenario are made by modeling 5 different shared socioeconomic pathways, or SSPs. SSPs are trends in carbon emissions, population growth, healthcare, education, and technology. This specific scenario is 2 of 5. SSP2 is considered the middle of the road because it most closely follows current SSP trends. The 2 main components of creating SOS presentations were to create datasets of photos and information for the playlists and to create playlists of datasets for different presentations. This is done with the visual playlist editor, which you can see on the top right, which allows you to change datasets by altering the description, title, layers, and media seen on each dataset. The presenter can also add notes and organize these datasets by category and keywords. And on the left here, you can see a playlist that I made that talks about sea level rise. The SOS program runs these playlists, which can be controlled by the iPad, kiosk, or main computer. Over the course of the 9 weeks of my internship, I have created 2 presentations with hands-on activities accompanied by scripts for each, as well as some guides for creating content for the datasets. The 2 presentations narrate the story of sea level rise along the Hawaiian and Pacific Islands. Each presentation approaches the same narrative differently, yielding a larger target audience. The first covers some global topics such as thermal expansion, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, albedo, and glacial meltwater, while it also focuses on some local issues such as king tides, saltwater intrusion, and wetland endangerment. The second focuses on data visualization and uses the IPCC SSP's scenarios to project future sea surface temperatures and sea level rise, with the hopes of understanding what our future climate could look like. While making these presentations, I had the opportunity to attend multiple climate workshops with local educators, as well as work in the field collecting some of my own data in the form of 360 king tide images. As you can see on the top right, there are 2 360 images comparing the low tide on the left and the high tide on the right. King tides, there's about a 3-foot difference. These images were taken with a 360-degree camera and were also taken in the backyard of the IRC. And the bottom right, you can see a photo collage that I made of endangered wetland species native to the Hawaiian Islands. After creating these presentations, I have learned a lot. The biggest lesson I learned was to not cram too many topics into one presentation. While creating my first script and playlist to tell the sea level rise story, I tried to put in way too many topics while also introducing the SSP scenarios, which created a problem for me because it dived too deep into complex topics that were not friendly for younger audiences. Another lesson I learned was to teach in three-dimensional. Because the science on a sphere is a 360-degree globe, I had to learn to teach from multiple angles, and I had to keep in mind that different students would be seeing things at the same time. I also learned how to connect changing visual data sets with research behind them, and to interpret and explain the data, which can be difficult when it is presented in a scientific vernacular. Moving forward with the last week of my internship, I still need to add the playlist to an SOS website, record presentations to share with local educators, share the guides and manuals with local teachers, and present the Sea Level Rise project at the SOS conference in August. And a little snapshot into my future, I would like to continue working in the current lab that I'm in at URI. I would like to join a graduate program at URI or at HIMB, and I would like to get hired as a research diver with Noaa. With that, I would like to acknowledge my mentor and co-mentors, Leon Geschwind, Hilary Petticord, and Beth Russell. I'd also like to thank the University of Rhode Island, the Halling Scholar Program, and a few of my fellow Halling Scholars. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosie, for kicking us off. That was such an incredible talk. Did anybody have questions for Rosie? Feel free to throw them in the chat and I'll relay them to her. We have a couple minutes for questions. So Aaron's asking if we can see your data set on the SOS now.
Oh, on the globe itself?
Yeah.
I would love to do that. I'm not sure if I can like move my camera downstairs and show those.
But it is, so you are able to show it on the Science on the Sphere?
Yes, the 360 images of the king tides look amazing on the globe.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, those are really cool images. Oh, Aaron's asking if it's down there right now, I guess.
Yes.
Very cool. Did anybody else have questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Leon Geschwind, who was Rosie's mentor during this project, so he can say a few words about Rosie.
Thanks, Allie. Yeah, I want to really just thank Rosie for her tremendous time and energy that she put into her Science on a Sphere project. She took a ton of initiative to not only learn kind of the presentation skills, but to create her own visualizations. And as you saw, she'll be using these, that we can use these both at the IRC and throughout Science on a Sphere sites around the world. She also took her 360 camera to take images. And I think one really unique thing that she brought to the presentations was, Rosie has a pretty interesting background, both a science background, but also a dance background, and was able to bring that into some of the interactive activities that she built for the project. So she'll also be presenting at the Science on a Sphere user group, so a much bigger audience as well in a month or so. So she has a amazing, bright future ahead of her. She is a scientific diver, so if any of you know of opportunities there, I'll put a plug out for that. And she's really interested in corals and scientific divers, but she was a tremendous asset this year, and looking forward to see what happens in her future. Thanks so much, Rosie. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Leon, for those remarks. It's really just cool to see this work because I feel like there's so many ways we can use this. So thank you, Rosie, for sharing out. You'll see again in the chat, there is the agenda there for any of you that came in late. We're going to go ahead and head on over to our next talk. So Kimberly Martin, unfortunately, is not going to be able to
timing of the talks again. in terms of
What's
also
that?
like saving time.
Oh, sorry, I was distracted by someone's unmuted microphone. So Kimberly Martin is unable to join us today. We're gonna move on over to Julia Grossman, who is also a hauling scholar, and she's gonna talk about the use of smart subsea cables for faster earthquake and tsunami wave detection.
Becky just came back.
Hello, can you all see the presentation?
Yes, it looks great.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Julia, and I'm a senior at Brown University. This summer, I worked with Dr. Laura Kong in the International Tsunami Information Center in order to quantify the improvement in earthquake and tsunami wave detection if we use a new technology called SMART. Marine natural hazards such as earthquakes and tsunamis can pose extreme danger to coastal communities, especially in certain regions such as the South Pacific, where the existing geophysical instrumentation is pretty sparse. Currently, the devices used to detect earthquakes are called seismometers, and they're typically land-based devices that measure acceleration. We can use dart buoys and coastal sea level gauges to measure sea level height and therefore detect tsunamis, but the spatial resolution of these instruments is pretty low, and there's often a sizable portion of them that are non-operational at any given time. One possible solution would be to implement smart cables into and incorporate them into existing subsea telecommunications cables. SMART stands for Science Monitoring and Reliable Telecommunications Cables, and that would involve integrating ocean bottom pressure, temperature, and seismic acceleration sensors into existing repeaters in telecommunications cables. These sensors would allow for the faster detection of earthquakes and tsunamis, especially if we add these sensors every 50 or 100 kilometers along the cables. That way, we would have a really dense array of point sensors that could detect geophysical events. SMART has currently not been implemented, but there are many projects underway. One such project is in the Vanuatu, New Caledonia region in the Southwest Pacific. There's a nearby active trench that is very seismically active and is important to study because it can generate tsunamigenic earthquakes. There's currently a project planned out to implement these smart repeaters along an existing cable there, and that's hopefully going to be completed by 2026. So this is a good place to quantify the impact of adding smart sensors to existing cables. I had a few different goals for my project, and the first goal was to modify, update, and rewrite some of the existing code that was originally drafted to assess SMART's performance in other regions, specifically Indonesia. While adjusting and validating these codes, I also wanted to generalize them, make them more user-friendly and easily applicable to new regions, because my main goal was to apply these codes to study SMART's improvement in Vanuatu and New Caledonia. I also then wanted to update my results by only including currently operational equipment, because then that way we would have a real-time assessment of how much better SMART makes our estimations. So the code that I worked with had a few steps. First, I had to generate the locations of tsunamigenic earthquakes that I wanted to use, and I chose along the trench in between New Caledonia and Vanuatu. Then I had to generate the cable routes and the exact locations of the smart sensors. Once I had that information, I was able to use seismic and tsunami models to calculate earthquake and tsunami travel times. And from there, I was able to see how long it would take each event along the trench to be detected by a certain number of sensors. For tsunami waves, there's usually some uncertainty, but using shallow water wave equations and fine resolution bathymetry data, it's possible to determine tsunami travel times as the waves propagate and refract. So briefly, for the first two kind of smaller parts of my project, I showed that I was able to modify and write some code to show that, yes, the scripts function as they should, and they're accurate. And I did that in Indonesia. Then I was also able to automize the code and make it a little bit more readable. So that way I could easily apply it to Vanuatu and New Caledonia, which was the main focus of my project. So here are the maps that I created, both with and without smart sensors in place. The smart cables are here connecting these islands. And this backwards S shape outlines the trench, and each of the circles represents a potential tsunamigenic earthquake. The circles are color-coded based on how long it would take an earthquake at this location to be detected by 4 seismometers. As you can see, we want that number to be as low as possible towards the red end of the spectrum. And SMART doesn't help as much as we had hoped it would, but close to the cables in this area here, there is an improvement, and we do see a movement of earthquakes into this category of being detected in under 30 seconds. The more significant results, though, come from the tsunami simulations. So again, here we have our trench and then the potential tsunami sources, and you can see that without SMART, it takes a really long time to detect tsunamis, especially in these regions here especially near these regions that I've circled in orange, which are the high population centers in this area. So, but we see that when we add SMART to this simulation, in this pink circle area that I've drawn, which is about 350 kilometers away from the SMART cable, that's where we see the most improvement when we add SMART. That also happens to overlap with where the largest population centers are. So even if SMART might not help for the entirety of the trench, it still will help significantly in the areas where the people are and where we would need to evacuate from. When we take a look at the data, you can see that this first row here for the whole trench, SMART only improves our detection times by a few minutes. But when we look in that 350 kilometer radius, the pink circle, which is near the population centers, we see that there's a really significant improvement in how fast we're able to detect the tsunamis. We go from 16.4 minutes to 11.8 minutes, which is really significant when trying to disseminate knowledge and organize an evacuation. Even when we look at the trench as a whole, we still see that the tsunamis detected in under 10 minutes increases to 15, which is really substantial. So overall, when we look at earthquakes, there's a 9.1 decrease in detection time within that 350 kilometer radius, although there is not much of an improvement for the trench as a whole. When we look at tsunamis, though, it's a different story, because for the trench as a whole, there's an 8.5% decrease in the amount of time it takes to detect the tsunami. And when we look at that smaller radius close to the population centers, there's a 28.4% decrease in the amount of time it takes to detect the tsunami. In some locations, the improvement is as much as almost 85%, as you can see here from this particular source. So in the future, there are a few different ways to approach this project. We could run the simulations in new regions, adjusting different parameters and the smart repeaters and their locations. We could also look at it from more of a science policy angle to look at maybe how we can get the funding to actually implement smart cables in different regions. So I just want to say thank you to my mentors, Laura and Bruce, to everyone in ITIC, to the Holling Scholarship Program for funding me, and to the other Holling Scholars here in Hawaii. You all really made my experience at Noaa and in Hawaii a truly incredible one. And thank you to everyone who listened. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Julia. What an incredible presentation. This is really valuable work, and people's lives are at stake when you're talking about tsunamis. So something like a 12-minute difference is huge. So very, very cool work. Did anybody have questions for Julia? I actually had a question for you. I was curious kind of what your next steps are with this project.
Yeah, so I think the next steps would be to look at other nearby regions and kind of to add in different cables transoceanic potentially across the Pacific. That would, if we can do that, then we can get kind of the largest benefit that SMART has to offer, and then we can narrow in on certain smaller regions where there would be more local tsunamis, which means that SMART will have probably more of an impact because there's just less instrumentation in such smaller areas.
Very cool. And we just had a comment from Krista saying this will be a great tool to have to tell the story on SMART and its importance. So thank you for that. Were there any other questions for Julia? All right, if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Laura Kong, who was Julia's mentor during this, throughout this project.
Okay, I hope you can hear me, and I turned on my camera, but not sure it's working. But just a real big shout out to Julia, especially in these times with COVID, when really we're talking about remote efforts, and she's been super energetic, super independent, just taking the initiative to actually reach out to not only myself, but we have some colleagues in the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, as well as at the University of Hawaii. So this is a huge project for the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and she was just able to jump right in. She was actually working at the University of Hawaii independently by herself. That was wonderful, as well as in our office. I'm really excited. She's planning to put in an abstract for the American Geophysical Union to present this, and I think hopefully much more that she'll be able to work with. So I'm really excited, and just a kind of a shout out. I know her mentor or her undergraduate advisor is on right now from Brown University. So hopefully she will continue to be interested and work with us. And I think that's it. And congratulations, Julia.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura, for those words. It is always exciting to see people as they're taking off doing these amazing things at the beginning of their careers. So thank you for sharing, Julia. And with that, we'll go ahead and pass things off to our next presenter, who is Kelsey Kuniyoshi. She is a PIF's Young Scientist Opportunity Intern, and today she'll be talking about creating marine species Hawaiian Cultural Authority files. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Kelsey.
Okay, sorry, just give me a second.
I love your haku, by the way.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yep, that looks great.
All right. Aloha mai kako o ko'uino o Kelsey no Mililani Maiau. So this summer, I worked primarily with Dr. Jonathan Fisk and Dr. Danica Kleiber in PISO for Project 3, which was creating marine species cultural authority files. So just to reiterate, my name is Kelsey Kuniyoshi. I was born and raised in Mililani in the Ahupua'a of Waipio, in the Moku of Ewa, in the Mokupuni of Oahu. And I'm currently a marine biology major at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. But I'm also a Marine Option Program member and a botany minor and a Kalao Kalahui member. But I'm most interested in NREM, like a career in conservation or education. So to briefly summarize what I'll be going over today, I'll be discussing the works of Blacklow et al., which is unpublished, but the findings and the implications preface my project. So I'll also be discussing my methodology using in vivo and the development of cultural frameworks. And then I'll discuss my results of my work in contrast to previous findings and between texts, and overall the contrast of culture versus science. And then I'll go on to future steps. So just some background, ecosystems are sociological systems which include culture. However, for Noaa, the fisheries managers have little to no fundamental understanding of cultural dimensions in the context of management and no systematic approach of how to apply this. So in Blacklow et al., authors sought to delve into this concept by examining foundational Hawaiian texts that were available in the English translation. So they used Hawaii as a pilot study, and they evaluated Ka'oi Hanala Vai'a, which is a text about Hawaiian fishing traditions, and then they compared and contrasted the priority species emphasized in this text versus the text in Noaa management documents. So they applied this frameworks to other papers such as Leong et al. And Pascual et al., in which expansions were not only made to cultural keystone species, but also cultural keystone ecosystem services, place-based approaches, and human well-being. And so to choose my knowledge sources, we first consulted with various experts and knowledge holders, and this included many people such as Keahiahi Long, Kavika Winter, Hoku Pusima, Flani Kuyocho, Pulama Collier, and Hoku Pihana. And it's also noted that for the sake of time and availability, I started with one text, which was available in the English translation, while Jonathan went with something that was in Olelo Hawaii. So I started with Olelo no Eao by Mary Kavena Pukui, which is a book about ancient Hawaiian proverbs, but I also used the Kumulipo and Vehevehe, which is the Hawaiian dictionary, to confirm my findings. So based on the works of Blacklow et al., we decided to use the 4 most commonly emphasized taxa, which ended up being aku, which is skipjack tuna, opelu, which is mackerel scad, he'e, which is octopus, and mano, which is shark. And it's also noted that aku and opelu both represent only one Linnaean species, while he'e and mano encompass multiple. So with the help and guidance of these practitioners, especially Dr. Jonathan Fisk, these cultural dimension categories were created for context codes that would later be edited and expanded as we read the text. And it's noted that because it's so hard to confine the Hawaiian biota and all its uses and values into categories, this document is considered living and can be edited multiple times. So using in vivo, I would do a word query first of the taxa and all its taxonomic forms, and then I would come across something such as Olelo no Eao 49, and then code it to the categories that we developed. So for example, Olelo no Eao would be coded to not only name shared with other taxa because it shares its name with uhuloa, which is a weed, and then names with multiple meanings because ala often refers to something that's not worth troubling over, and then also layered meaning, which is kauna, because it has a deeper meaning. It's also noted that this particular Olelo no Eao would only be coded towards Calistoctopus ornatus, which is he'e puloa, because it refers only to this specific octopus, as opposed to all he'e. And so I continue these methods for each taxa, and looking at the context surrounding them, I found that he'e actually was mentioned in the most Olelo no Eao, closely followed by mano, which is in contrast to aku and apelu, which were the most emphasized in Ka'oihana Labaia. In contrast, Manoa had the most unique context codes, which was encompassing almost nearly all of the big bins. But when we say unique context codes, we're only referring to subcategories. So to visualize this, here's a graph. And in contrast to he'e, aku, and opelu, Olelo no Eao's referencing Manoa often referred to deities such as Ka'ahupaha, which is a guardian shark of Pu'uloa, which is something that's very important to my ahupua'a. And although Hawaiians did eat sharks sometimes and utilize their body parts, such as their teeth or their skin, those who had sharks as an aumakua did not eat or kill them, hence why it's not as emphasized in a book about fishing. The shark is also the kino law of ku, and similarly, he'e is the kino law of kanaloa. So therefore, while aku and opelu are very important food sources, with opelu being specifically for bait, he'e and manoa are regarded on a different scale. So what is an authority fa and what goes into it? Authority files can look like this, which is something that we're mostly familiar with the fish base, but it can also look like this. And authority files often contain links to other references or other species, and different databases such as worms, algae base, fish base, native plants Hawaii, all serve as different resources. And while native plants Hawaii does have some culture context to nomenclature and uses and values, there's little to, I wouldn't consider this a cultural authority file yet. And so what we're currently working on is how to organize our information in more of a cultural way. So for a while, I was going back and forth about how to organize this in the easiest way so that fisheries managers could view these documents and therefore alter their practices. And there's a couple ways to do this, such as alphabetical. And at one point, I had taxa that encompassed multiple species, such as he'e and mano, with the endemic species at the top, because endemicity is something with intrinsic value to the scientific community. But indemnity is not necessarily a Hawaiian value, while native and non-native is, unless it's referring to a species with a very specific locale, such as a plant or a snail that's limited to a mountain range. But it's also noted that some Hawaiian deities are considered foreign or haole, such as Pele, who came from Tahiti, and the status of non-native is not necessarily always considered bad or wrong. So the status of native and endemic is quite a scientific concept, therefore this would beg the question of what's the best way to organize our information. So he'e puloa, which is Calistoctopus ornatus, or the night taco, had the most mentions of all octopus species. So should this be placed at the highest top priority for management? Similarly, with Manoa niuhi, which is represents both tiger sharks and great white sharks, should this be placed at the top? Not necessarily, because Manoa and Hawaii had a different way of naming based on characteristics as opposed, like behavioral characteristics, such as opposed to physical. So what's next? Realistically, we know that Hawaii is a melting pot of cultures, and Hawaii's fisheries are influenced by multiple cultures, including the Japanese culture and the Samoan culture and the Tahitian culture, and fishes such as the u'u or the soldier fish also go by other names such as menpachi. And similarly with he'e, octopus is often referred to as taco, or mano goes by other names. And we'd like to expand this project to other cultures and other texts, including things such as mele and oli. So I'd like to end this with one of my favorite olelo no ea, which is ikowa mamua kawa mahope, which means in the time before and in the time after, which means our future is secured in the past. And overall, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Jonathan Fisk, Danica Kleiber, Adam Ayers, Kalani Kuyocho, Kirsten Leong, Bradley Go, Keahiahi Long, Eleanor Kleiber, Kavika Winter, Hoku Pihana, Hoku Pusima, and Pulama Collier, who not only helped with the development of our frameworks, coding, and the organization of information, but above all, they helped me understand the Makabalu process. And then here's my literature. Any questions?
Great talk, Kelsey. Thank you so much for that. I think we can all agree that incorporating culture into science is becoming so important, and we just can't wait to see what you're going to do next with this. It's very exciting stuff. Did we have any questions from the audience? We have probably a minute for questions. I'm very interested in the coding process, but I feel like that could be like a very long conversation. So maybe I'll ask you offline about that. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so we'll go ahead and pass it over to Jonathan Fisk, who was Kelsey's mentor during this project.
Dude, small. Well, first, well done. You nailed it, Kelsey. Yeah, figuring out how to parse and distill culture in a very like palpable, digestible way is a very difficult feat, and it requires a lot of vulnerability and flexibility and a lot of just like being open to new ideas and change and figuring things out as you go, as it makes sense in the different contexts. Kelsey was good with it all. Very humble and reflexive, and also very keen as we met with our cultural advisors. Yeah, this is, and you're part of work that's going to blossom into something that Noaa and marine management as a whole needs. So, congratulations. Yeah. Also, it's just a pleasure working with you, and I can't wait to see what the future has in store.
Thank you so much for that, Jonathan. And just to note, there's a lot of comments in the chat box just saying like great work and just how important this work is. So thank you for sharing, Kelsey. We really appreciate it. All right. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and move on to our next presentation, which will be from Juliana Zolopa. And she's also a PIF's Young Scientist Opportunity intern. And today she's going to be talking about why sharks attack, environmental drivers of shark-human interactions. So I'm very excited. After we were just hearing about sharks from Kelsey's perspective, it'll be cool to hear it from a different perspective. So I'll go ahead and take it. You can take it away.
Okay. Does that show up okay for everybody? All right, great. Hi, my name is Juliana Zalopa, and today I'll be talking about why sharks attack, environmental drivers of shark-human interactions in Hawaii. I'd just like to start out by thanking my mentors, Don Kobayashi, Kisei Tanaka, and Joy Smith, who made this project possible and helped me out through the whole thing. This project actually started out with some interest from National Geographic, who wanted to know more about a series of 3 unusual cookie cutter shark bites on swimmers attempting the Kaiwi Channel crossing between Oahu and Molokai. Cookie cutter shark bites on live human beings are really rare. And cookie cutter shark bites themselves are easily identifiable because of their unique shape and clean edges, and they achieve this with a row of sharp lower teeth, hook-like upper teeth, and unique lips that allow for suction, which you can kind of see demonstrated in that top left picture. Cookie cutter sharks are globally distributed in tropical to subtropical waters around the world, and they are generally thought to be vertical migrators, which means they spend most of their time at depth and come up at night to feed. They feed on a variety of organisms from different trophic levels because of their unique feeding strategy. The most common way for humans to interact with cookie cutter sharks is actually through bites on fishing catches, which you can kind of see in the lower left picture. And you can also see the variety of shapes that cookie cutter shark bites can be. They can be more perfectly circular or more oblong. The other way that humans typically interact with cookie cutter sharks is with bites on gear. So this lower right picture is actually a picture of the end of a cob trawl net that's been bitten by a cookie cutter shark. From there, we decided to look more broadly at shark-human interactions in Hawaii, and we did so using the DAR database of shark-human interactions. And so this collects information about date and time, location, species involved with an interaction. And from there, we generated this plot. And you can kind of see we have total interactions on the x-axis here from 1995 to the present and the different species that were involved. And tiger sharks are implicated in a lot of these interactions. There's a few reasons why this might be. Large, mature tiger sharks are common here in the main Hawaiian Islands because there's good breeding grounds here and also because Hawaii is so geographically isolated. Also in Maui specifically, where a lot of shark-human interactions take place, there are lots of small and more localized tiger sharks that overlap with beaches that are common for human use. So with that, we decided to look at shark-human interactions in Hawaii more generally. The first set of influences we looked at was temporal, and we analyzed these using generalized linear models. So this first plot shows total shark-human interactions over the years. And as you can see, there's a general upward trend, which makes sense as human population is upward trending. But you can also see a sort of interesting cyclical pattern that emerges. So it'll peak in some years and then dip down and then go up again. It's also interesting to look at tiger sharks more specifically. Again, it makes sense that in years with more shark-human interactions, we have more tiger sharks involved, but also even in more recent, even in lower recent years like 2017 and 2018, we still seem to have more tiger sharks than comparative previous years. This next plot, we decided to look at time of day. And so we had dawn, which was 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., morning, which was 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., afternoon, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m., sunset, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., and night, which was all other hours. And so there's an obvious peak in the morning and afternoon for shark-human interactions. And this is most likely due to human beach use. This is when there's going to be more people at the beach and in the water, and so more interactions take place. The next set of influences we looked at were the human and spatial element. And again, we use generalized linear models. So this plot here, we have the islands on the x-axis and total interactions, and also broken down by activity types. So we have surfing, shore-based activities, which was things like wading or fishing, deep water fishing, which included things like spearfishing, service-based activities like swimming or snorkeling, and also paddling. And so as you can see, we have a lot more of the surfing and at the surface-based activities. This is likely because there's just a lot of these activities going on, and also because these activities put people in the water for extended periods of time. Also, interestingly, the main Hawaiian Islands, or the more populated Hawaiian Islands, had the most interactions, but interestingly, Maui had the most interactions despite being the third most populated island. This could have something to do with the fact that there's the large tiger shark presence there, and there's also proportionally a lot of tourism. And when tourists come, they spend a lot of time at the beach and in the water, so this might be increasing their interactions. We also looked at cardinal direction that the interactions took place, and so the north and west shores of an island tended to have many more interactions than the east and south. This could be due to beach accessibility or some other factors that we didn't get to look into. Finally, we got to look at environmental variables, and we did so using environmental data summaries of the ERDAP collection of satellite environmental data via the Coast Watch and Ocean Watch programs. And basically how this works is you take a specific point in space and time and you can create a box around it. And from there, you can compare that with satellite environmental data for the area around it. So let's say you're looking at sea surface temperature. If you have a specific point, you can take the average sea surface temperature values for the week previous, the month previous, the year previous, whatever time scale you want, and compare it to your specific point to see where it falls. But we did this with 6 environmental variables, and those were sea surface temperature, surface wind speed, precipitation, chlorophyll A, KD-PAR, and KD-490. Using this methodology, we identified 2 environmental variables that seemed to have a driving influence, and those were chlorophyll A and KD-490. KD490 is the diffuse light attenuation coefficient for 490 nanometer light. And this basically means how deep in the water column blue-green light can penetrate. And this is affected by particles in the water. So this is a good proxy for water clarity. Higher KD490 values mean that the water is murkier. And so as you can see on this plot, we have these gray histograms in the back, and these are the 8-day average KD490 values for the area surrounding a shark-human interaction. And then the dots along the bottom are individual shark-human interactions. And so 74% of these interactions occurred above the 50th percentile of KD490, which means there was a tendency for these interactions to happen in murkier water. This follows conventional wisdom that says to stay out of the water after a storm or in murky water. There's a few reasons why this might be. It could reduce human visibility, so people are less likely to see or avoid a shark in the water. And there's also been some studies that indicate that sharks, especially tiger sharks, have some sort of preference for murkier water. This could be to aid in hunting or for younger, smaller sharks to avoid predation themselves. There's a lot of places we could go from here. We could combine EDX with beach use demographics to look at more populated beaches. We'd also examine the role of tourism more closely to see if when there's more tourists, there's more interactions. And also just we need to know a lot more about cookie cutter sharks. We don't really know a lot about them despite being such a globally distributed species. And thank you. That's all that I have. This is a cool video of a live cookie cutter shark. This kind of stuff is really rare. So thank you, and I can take any questions.
Wow, thank you so much. That was such a great presentation. And I can't believe you have video of a cookie cutter shark. I've never seen anything like that. We actually
yeah.
we've pulled them up, in plankton nets before. That's always an issue, and they end up cutting a hole in the net, and we have to ditch it. But to see live footage of that is pretty cool, very unique. Did anybody have questions for Juliana? Feel free to throw them in the chat. I guess you did mention, I'm so curious about that northwest, how there was more interactions on the northwest shores of islands. Do you have any speculations to other reasons that might be happening?
Yeah, that was also really interesting for us because it's so stark. There was really very few in the east and south shores. My main guess would probably something to do with beach accessibility or usability. Like just thinking about like on the Big Island, more people are going to be going to the beach on the west shore versus like east and south shore. Or here, there's going to be a lot more surfers on the north shore. So that would be my guess, but that would definitely be something interesting to look into more.
Very cool. Thank you for that. And we had a question from Caroline. What was your most important takeaway from this experience?
For me, I think it was getting to use the EDS code. That was really, really cool. And it's a very powerful tool that I had never heard about before, but it's really interesting to let you take all this satellite data that can be hard to work with on its own and make it a lot more usable.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and pass it off to Kisei Tanaka, who was Juliana's mentor throughout this project.
Yeah, I just want to give a big shout out to Juliana, Dawn, Joe, and myself. Had a pleasure working with this very talented young marine data scientist from UH Hilo. She kind of exceeded every expectation that we set on, and just amazed by just how sheer willpower to go through this terabytes of satellite data sets and building shark human database, merging those two together, deriving these super interesting conclusions in a very meaningful way. So big shout out. This is a really important findings, and we all are really curious to see how her career takes off from here. And I believe she will be staying this marine science field, and hopefully we'll see her works in the future. And yeah, congratulations. That's great stuff. Great stuff.
Thank you so much, Kisei. Yeah, it's always exciting to see what's going to happen next, right? We did have one other question since we have a little bit of time. Crystal was wondering if you're going to publish your findings, Juliana.
Yeah, actually, that was something that we're looking into. I would love to. That's the short answer.
That's great to hear. All right, with that, we're gonna move on to our next presentation, which is actually the last presentation of this session. We're gonna have a quick break to grab water, use the bathroom, and then we'll be back on for session 2. So with that, I will kick it over to Kara Murphy, who is one of our Hollings preparatory program interns, and she'll be talking about creating a 360-degree tour of Mokupapapa Discovery Center in Hilo, Hawaii.
Thank you so much, Allie. Apologies for my blank screen. I have been fiddling with it literally all morning, and it is just not working right now. I'm so sorry. I really wish that I could show everyone my face and we could all talk. But unfortunately, that's just not how it's going to work out, so I apologize again. But hello, can everyone see my screen okay? Is that good?
Yes, it looks great.
Awesome, beautiful. My name is Kara Murphy. I'm a student at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and like Ali said, I worked on creating a 360 virtual tour of Mokupapapa Discovery Center, and I thought I would just kind of give a brief rundown of how we decided to structure our tour so that it could be used accessibly to the public and also as an educational resource. So a little bit of context on the layout of the tour. We broke the tour up by the different rooms of the Discovery Center and made it navigable by a map that you can see in that bottom corner. And then you can move your way around the tour through the different exhibits, which all have little highlights, blurbs of information that you can read as you make your way through the tour. So these highlights include a lot of different information. Some include cultural context. So for example, we have a big mural that is the visual representation of the kumulipo, the mele, that was kind of addressed earlier. And that just provides some cultural context on the kumulipo and its significance in Hawaiian culture. And then we also have some highlights that include historical context on a lot of our exhibits. So for example, the Battle of Midway took place in the Papahanaumokuokea Monument, and we have a little blurb about all of the information on the Battle of Midway and the military history in the monument. And then also some of our highlights do include that scientific significance. So we have a lot of fish, we have a huge fish tank, and we have all of the scientific names of the fish that you can scroll through around the fish tank. Some other resources that we decided to include in the tour, just both for a little bit more fun and also to make it more accessible, specifically for educational use, include various video and audio clips. So we have lots of different videos that are already in the Discovery Center that you can see when you visit in person, but also some video clips that aren't included, just to add that little bit of extra information and resources. We also included a scavenger hunt, which is my favorite part of the tour. So different parts of the tour you can click on and it'll take you to 360 videos that were taken in the monument itself, which I think is really interesting. It's a great way to get the community involved in somewhere that isn't necessarily accessible for the public. So I think it's a great way to kind of transport our public to the monument, which I think is awesome. And then I am also working on creating a collection of teacher resources. So things like how this can fit into standards and be used into current curriculum, and also how curriculum can be developed around the tour itself. Again, in order to make this a really accessible resource for educational use, because I think it can be a great resource for classroom use and educational use in general. For me and my future plans, for right now, I'm trying to finish the tour. It's been kind of a whirlwind. I only have a couple weeks left to finish it, but it's been going pretty well so far. And as I am a Hollings prep scholar and not a Hollings scholar yet, I hope to apply for Hollings Scholar this year and hopefully finish my BS in Marine Science in the next few years. And then just to finish off, I'd like to make some acknowledgements. Thank you to Andy Collins, my mentor, the team at the Discovery Center, everyone working on Hollings prep program, and the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer anything. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Kara. I'm sorry that you couldn't get your camera working, but it's great to hear your voice and hear about the work that you did. And speed talks are never easy, so we really appreciate you do that. And, you know, as an educator myself, I'm happy to share this out with teachers that I work with. I think this is such a valuable tool, especially in the world that we live in these days where virtual opportunities are really, really valuable. So thank you for that. And if you guys did see Andy threw a couple of links in the chat, to one link to the tour as well as some images from a compact 360 camera. So feel free to click on those links and check them out. Did we have any questions from the audience? Not seeing any questions. Oh, here, Celeste was asking, how easy was it to learn 3D Vista? Good question.
I watched a lot of videos. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not really a tech savvy person. And I even said that to Andy coming into this. I was like, I don't really know my way around a computer, but I'm going to learn. And it was a really easy software to use. I really enjoyed it. I had one complication the other day where my whole computer crashed and I lost like a week's worth of work, but it's okay. We were able to kind of get that back up and running and redo everything. But for the most part, it's been pretty easy. It's been a lot of fun. I'm a very creative person, and there's a lot of creativity that goes into it. So I've enjoyed myself.
Great. I'm so happy to hear that. And hopefully we'll see you back next year as a Halling Scholar. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andy to say a few words. Andy Collins.
Yeah, first, mahalo, Kara. She did jump in cold and told me off the bat, you know, I don't know if I have the technical skills for this, and just jump right in and started watching videos and learned how to use the little camera, the 360 camera we have, and just done a bang up job. It's really incredible seeing it evolve each day, and it'll be a really useful tour for us. Tool for us over here at Mokupapapa. And I also know Leon has the software as well, and he's worked on this for the 360 for the IRC. So it's the same. Hopefully we'll have maybe a network of these kinds of tours for all of our facilities and things here in the Pacific. And after this, Kara will be available as a paid consultant to travel around the region, do this for your various sites. So,
No.
So this is good career building.
No, thank you.
And I'll just say thank you, Kara, for your great job and for willingness, and also just being a great team player. She's also helped us here and helping at the desk and doing some education programs at Mokupapapa, and has just plugged right in and is fantastic. So look forward to future with Kara and the Hollings program, and mahalo.
Thank you so much, Andy and Kara. I would love to hire you to come do a 360-degree tour of our one of our Noaa ships. We've always talked about doing that, and I think it'd be a really cool tool to have. So we'll be in touch. All right, with that, that concludes session 1 of our symposium. We are actually on time, which is amazing. This never happens. We're going to have a very brief 5-minute or 5.5-minute break for everyone to grab water, take a stretch, use the bathroom. We'll be back on at 10:17, so maybe hop on a minute early. We'll be starting promptly at 10:17. So thank you to all of our presenters and mentors, and we'll see you back here in a few minutes.
It's a really fast break there. Beth, I'm going to use the chat to send a 1-minute message to people, and I believe that will pop up on their screen, hopefully. And then I'll do maybe like a running rabbit if they're running late for Get Pal. And I'll speak up if we really need to let them know, but between the two of us, we have to keep the thing on track. It's a very fast agenda.
Anyone who times an agenda to the minute is like, wow. Like that's a high degree of confidence in.
Yeah, we can do it.
We can do it. We can do it. We got this.
You all good, Beth and Kimberly? Great. I'm always so happy when we actually stick to the schedule. Makes me just all warm and fuzzy.
I'm just saying that you have it down to the minute, and clearly you've got an audience that's on it. Impressed.
Yes.
High bar, Kali and Celeste. It's going to be a tough act to follow.
You guys got this. And we're here for backup, so. And Beth, just as a reminder, if there's any issues with people sharing their presentations, I have almost all of the presentations. So I can just if I see that there's some issue, I'll hop in and just present for them. So just a heads up.
Just one question, Allie. In the past, it seems that if they talk a little more than 1 minute at the end, we allow that. It just cuts into their question time. Is that right? So
Yeah, there's definitely some flexibility there. Just fill it out. We haven't had a ton of questions, but sometimes you get a bunch. So
okay.
Yeah, it's fine. If they, once you give them the time's up, then they'll wrap it up.
Okay.
And Beth can cut them off if it's going way too long.
Okay, so in the interest of keeping us right on time, I'm going to start this very slightly early and muted myself, reshare the agenda. And I did want to remind anybody who came on late that we are recording this. Please put any questions you have in the chat. Otherwise, if you're not a speaker, please keep yourself on mute. Also, please do keep your camera on. It's very difficult to be engaged as a speaker when all you see are little boxes of names. So we do want there to be that engagement with the audience. So please do try to keep your camera on. Presenters will all get 1 minute warning. It'll be in the chat. So keep an eye out for that. And then we'll have some time for questions. So here we are at 10:17, and I want to introduce Caroline Edmonds. She's going to speak about coral husbandry at the Waikiki Aquarium. And this is speed.
Can you hear me? Just want to double check.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, aloha, everyone. Today I'll be going over my internship at the Waikiki Aquarium in conjunction with Noaa. So I kind of took a little alternate approach. So with the great and helpful guidance of Dr. Kobayashi, I was really into coral husbandry. So he and I helped actually create my own internship to learn all about coral husbandry. So kind of walk through the steps and different objectives I learned. And that is actually a picture of me in the shark tank, which I will touch on later. So first I had to really learn the basics about coral husbandry. So this included a lot of different water quality aspects. So you can see a pH probe in the top right hand of your screen, as well as really understanding the system, such as you see that basket and a lot of the pipes of one of the coral systems at the aquarium here in the middle, and then also how to get rid of little nuisance animals such as fireworms you see in the top left. So the next big sort of aspect was learning about coral health, and one area of focus was coral fragging. So if you're not familiar with this process, it's basically using bone cutters, such as you see in the left image, as well as a Dremel, or using a diamond saw, as you see in the right image. So if there's an unhealthy coral, you can actually save that part of the coral by cutting off the healthy portion. So I actually was able to do a couple of these with an Aquapora species. So this little area that was still healthy was treated for whatever the disease was, and then actually glued back onto ceramic tiles here, and then placed back in the system to allow this little piece to grow. So next, I also was trying to identify a lot of the various corals. As you just saw in the last picture, that was Aquapora. There's over 300 species. So I used dissection scopes, as you can see on the right, and microscopes for a closer image, as you can see on the left. I also tried to accumulate all of my knowledge I've been learning to create my own coral tank with various fragments. So I did a lot of research into lighting, drain systems, what would be the best setup, depth of the tank, all that to create this final project you can see here on the right. So in this case, I used Montipora capricornis, not native Hawaiian coral, but I was able to practice cutting and figuring out the best methods of fragging, as you can see on the left here. And that is kind of like my final system, and still working on it to this day to kind of perfect it, the flow, as each coral is slightly different is what I've been learning. I also had the chance to learn a couple of husbandry for other species, such as baby seahorses that were born while I was there. And since I was certified to dive, I was actually able to help out in that shark tank. So you can see that big grouper behind me, but we also have a couple other species in there that help out. I just really want to acknowledge the help of Dr. Kobayashi to help set this whole program up as a little unorthodox, as well as the Hollings program and the Waikiki Aquarium. So thank you, and I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. We might have time for one quick question for Caroline. Any questions for Caroline? So I had a quick question. What was the most challenging thing for you to learn?
Since it is at an aquarium, there's always so many different things going on. So honestly, a lot of it was scheduling of time, and especially for that tank, you really want it to run for a while to have all those water parameters correct. So just figuring out timing and of the husbandry tank, because various systems could go down at any point in time. So just being flexible with that was probably one of the hardest parts for me.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it up to her mentor, Randy Kosaki.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Caroline. As Caroline mentioned, this was not a stock Hollings internship that was available on the SSIO website. She didn't see what she wanted to do, and being a real go-getter, she went out by herself and made it happen. I met Caroline, I gave a lecture in a class given by Dr. Mark Hickson at UH Manoa, happen to talk a little bit about the Acropora corals that are kind of unique in Hawaii to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And the rest is history, or I'm history. Anyway, Caroline came up to us and proposed this. We don't have permits to handle live corals, and we love our colleagues at DLNR, but as you know, it can take 3 years to get a permit just to look sideways at a coral. So we partnered with the Waikiki Aquarium because they have corals and coral permits. So mahalo to Dr. Andy Rossiter. And you can see what Caroline's job is very much research and applied research, and she's done a great job of both. And as a continuing student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, Caroline also has another option, which is not open to many of our Hollings interns. She'll still be around, and Dr. Hickson has expressed a willingness to extend this internship beyond the Hollings period. So she may be able to earn academic credit in the fall from UH Manoa and continue her coral studies at the Waikiki Aquarium. So being the go-getter that she is with opportunities like those research for credit and the Hollings scholarship, I'm sure her future is very bright, and the corals of the world who are gradually fading into oblivion are going to benefit from all the work and research that Caroline does. So good job, Caroline. Thank you. And thank you, Don and team, for hosting this workshop.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Randy, for those that great encouraging words there. I'm going to turn the table over to the microphone over to Malia Martin.
All right, thank you. All right, is that good? How's that looking?
You're still in, you're not in, you want to
Oh yeah, it's
share button.
okay, so
There you
there
go.
I am.
Perfect.
Alrighty, thank you everyone. Aloha kako, my name is Malia Martin. I was born and raised in the Mokupuni of Oahu, and I go to Libra Community College, and my project is utilizing artificial light for underwater camera systems. Oh no, there we go, thank you. So my project actually directly relates to the Bottomfish Research Survey Project, and what they do is they deploy camera systems called the Mouse into the ocean and take surveys on a group of fish called the Deep 7 bottomfish species. And this group of fish is actually very culturally significant to Hawaii because it's so sought after by fishermen. So we find it pretty critical to keep track of how these fish are doing, as well as these fish are usually within ambient light depth ranges, except there's one species in particular that goes below these ambient light ranges, and that's where we kind of need a light to be able to see in those depths. And that's where my project comes in making a light that'll fit onto our system so that we can see as deep as we need to. So on the right, this is a picture of our mouse system, and these cameras are actually monochrome cameras, and that is because monochrome tends to be more light sensitive rather than colored cameras. And on the left is an example of this. This is an ehu that happens to be one of the Deep 7 bottomfish that we actually target. So this video is an example of how it would look if we didn't have any sort of light system or any very little ambient light, where you can see the fish very close to the camera, but it's not very optimal conditions for us to be analyzing videos that look like this. So these are two previous attempts at making artificial light systems for our camera systems. This is the Unicorn light and the 360 light, and these are sort of how they perform in our previous videos. And the Unicorn light is actually very heavy on the bait arm and tends to point the mouse downward rather towards the substrate. And you may get some fish in those videos, but the fish that we're looking at generally reside above the substrate, and you'd want the mouse to look along the substrate so that you can see I guess deeper into the ocean rather than looking at the ground. And 360 light is not adjustable in intensity, so once that thing turns on, the fish just run away and we never see them. So I tried to tackle both these issues in the prototypes that I ended up making. Using those two previous lights, we were able to gather some videos with some fish in it where we were able to measure ranges. And what I mean by that is in a video, we were able to see a fish and we measure how far we're able to detect a fish, as well as how far we're able to measure a fish. And we do this in a software called Event Measure. And this is an example of how that would look when we do analyze these videos. And using these ranges that we gathered, we were able to see what were the optimal conditions of
how bright we needed a light to be and which lights were able to allow us to analyze videos successfully. And later on, once we gathered these ranges, we actually brought all the lights downstairs along with the mouse system and took lux measurements, or lumens per meter squared, of each light that we used in the videos. And based off of that data, we were able to quantify that 300 lux, or 300 lumens per meter square, is the optimal conditions that we need to accurately and successfully analyze one of these videos. So my objectives for the summer were to create a prototype that would clearly illuminate species at below these ambient light depths, and to also measure the ranges of these fish in our previous videos to be able to compare how our lights, I guess, were to how they're going to be in the future. The steps I took to complete this is I first began brainstorming based off of the videos I watched previously, how I wanted my lights to be shaped, I guess, and how I wanted the positioning to be, what color I wanted them to be, and I pitched this to my team, and they were able to make my idea a reality. And that's when we began modeling. I actually made my very first computer-aided design on the computer for the 3D print that I wanted to make, and I ended up assembling it and eventually throwing it over the pier on the mouse system to be able to review those videos and see how our lights actually ended up performing, and then gather those ranges and go through the same process of gathering ranges and seeing where we can improve upon on our lights. So this is my first model. I ended up with a ring light design where I would actually have two of these, and they would be on each lens of the camera. And I chose a ring light because on a dry test, when you're showing a ring light on a wall, it has a pretty good spread, at least within the camera's field of view, and it has very minimal shadows and very minimal hot spots, or kind of a spotlight effect, sort of how the unicorn light gave, and those are things that I wanted to avoid. As well as in these little slots I made for the LED plates, I actually put slight wedges on there, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to angle the light slightly outward, because if you have lights that point straight forward in the ocean, this is sort of what it looks like, where it just kind of bounces back at you and you can't really accurately identify the fish that are in front of the camera. So I angled those outward to avoid that problem. This 3D print actually ended up being a lot too big, much too big for our mouse system. So we ended up just using it to test different sealants. In this second model, I tackled that size constraint problem by making it pentagon and reducing the amount of 3D print I used, and the spin on the mouse perfectly, so I was able to put in my lights, and I ended up using red lights because red tends to dissipate into the ocean quicker, and that's less sensitive to the fish's eyes, since we were especially looking at deep water fish. And I was able to throw this over the pier, and after the first drop, it flooded immediately. See this line? That is all water. So that's when we came to the realization that we need to focus on perfecting our 3D housing, and that's what I've been doing since that test, and what I will continue to do is work on completely waterproofing our 3D print housing. And this is an O-ring that I tried. You can see it's completely filled with water. This one I physically and chemically prepped to 3D print and before sealing it. And there's still water in it. And this one I did the same thing, but using a different sealant, and there is still water in it. So that is something that I need to work on. And once that's perfected, I'll be able to add my electronics in again and hopefully video the results as I planned. I'd like to thank everyone on this list for helping me through this project and supporting me, navigating me throughout the summer. I especially want to thank Audrey, Jeremy, Diana, Christopher, and Jordan for actually helping me like every single day and really tolerating my lack of knowledge. I came in here with zero background, and I told them that. And I really appreciate how patient they were with me, and I'm so grateful for a rad team like them. I don't know if I have time for questions, but if I do, please ask away, and if not, this is my email.
We do.
Yeah, we have time for one question. So I don't see any in the chat, so please just unmute yourself or type it up. Otherwise, I will ask a question. Nope. Okay. So let's see here. What kind of sealants did you practice with? Things like were you looking at purely marine sealants, or were you looking like we had roof leakage? You know, did you were looking at some of the construction adhesives? What kind of a spectrum of things have you tested?
Oh man. So I actually just got a huge order of stuff so that I could just keep trying a bunch of things. But what I've used so far is I tried that O-ring. I tried kind of the first thing I tried in my peer test, I actually used a plastic bonding adhesive, which I don't think was very good. It was also very old, so it was very tacky when we were still
when we ended up deploying it. So I kind of see why that ended up not working. But I've actually, the most recent one I've used was an actual marine Achilles sealant, as well as I ordered a bunch of Flex Seal. I'm excited to try that, see if that works. I mean, he fixed a boat with it, so I have to try that first. And I also am trying some resin ideas to see if there's a way that I can kind of encase the LED plates so that we can kind of save them and not have a plexi there instead. So yeah, there's a lot of wide range of different ways that we're trying to make this waterproof, I guess.
Great. R&D is very challenging, and yes, you learn how not to make something waterproof, definitely. Kind of like the light bulb quote. So thank you so much. I didn't see any other questions in the chat here, so I'm going to turn it over to Diana Miller Green, who was her mentor, to wrap up for Malia.
Great. So we were so thankful for Malia and all her hard work on this. Malia was not only a PISO intern, but she was also the very first Hokuala Kikaha Kai Rising Star intern. So that was really special for us. And with that internship, we were really hoping to get someone who was local and someone who had had a lot of enthusiasm, but maybe hadn't had a whole lot of experience yet. And we were so excited. Malia has been just fantastic. You can see in her presentation everything she's done, from designing the light in CAD, building it, really challenging design, trying all those different sealants. The project is still ongoing. She's been doing work learning event measure, taking light measurements, lux measurements that we're still going to be using all of that data as we continue this project in the future. So we're just, we're really excited that we have her on board and looking forward to all the good work we're going to get done in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. Again, great job. Yeah, well, I'll look forward to hearing what works. Again, R&D is always lessons to be learned for other projects as well. So I'm going to turn the table over to Jake Snyder. It was an intern with ESD. He's going to talk about investigating temperature effects on end-to-end oceanic ecosystem models. All right. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Jacob, we cannot hear you.
Alrighty, can you?
Perfect.
No. Oh. There we go.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Alrighty. So hello, I'm Sarah. I am a rising fourth year at the Pennsylvania State University, and I'm here with the Holling Scholar Program working Fisk, and worked on the propagation of physiological responses to temperature through oceanic food web models. So we use, and I just outline the basic process that Ecotran goes through to model. I specifically highlighted the last three scenarios or simulations, and running those simulations, saving them, and plotting them, because those are the specific process that later. So this model is the result of an evolution through multiple publications. I highlighted House, Rtk, Vandergrant, and Snyder because that's my project. But Howe took that larger model and focused it on Hawaii's language relevant to us, and also incorporated physical factors, which is also relevant to us. And then with Ecotran, and also included Virgo distributions and migration within the model. And then my specific project, improving the amount of organisms within the model to temperature. And just a little background, ecophysiological is just an organism's response to, and for me, again, it was temperature. So overall, the purpose of my project was predict the effect of the environment on the
Hey,
production
Jake,
rate
I'm
and
sorry.
community
I need to
composition
interrupt you for
of
just
organism groups within the model.
Jacob.
And within that, might have a larger impact on top predators via effects on their prey, so at the bottom of the food web, rather than on the top side. So I had 3 main objectives. My first one was to go on a research cruise and collect temperature data. Objective 10 values from a literature review. And Q10 is a parameter that quantifies metabolic costs in response and all into the model with the help of Dr. Rtk and ran some simulations and plotted those simulations. So objective 1, a week research cruise in the North Pacific subtropical gyre. We followed this cruise track, so we hit a low catch zone for big-eyed tuna, and we sampled a transect in between just to see what ecosystem was supported tuna catches. Another goal of ours was to look at the effect of temperature and oxygen on these tuna supporting. So as you can see, the track captured a fairly large range of both temperature. Oh, keep my head still. Okay. Temperature values, and we will in the future combine that with biological parameters, so the fish samples that we collected. We forecast on these tuna supporting populations or ecosystems. My specific role in the project was to deploy recover the tuna and the IKMT, or the Isaac Kidd midwater trawl, which is on the right. The mic in front of you. Can y'all hear me okay?
Jake, you're cutting in and out, but there seems to be like a delay on your sound. So maybe just maybe hold it up next to your mouth and hold still. There you go. Try that.
Does that help at all?
Keep going.
I'll do that. Thank you. So these nets were used to sample tuna larvae and eggs and localize them within the water column, and also just fish composition in general. At Get Cruise, I went on a deep dive into some literature and found Q10 values, which again quantifies metabolic in response to find Q10 for about half of the species in the model, or half of the groups in the model, and put them in an Excel spreadsheet, which you can see here. Sorry, is there still sound problems?
Yeah, I think we can power through here. I think there's a delay in your sound, so maybe you could take the microphone out and just use the computer.
Alrighty.
I think you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, so objective 3, we took all that data and run a few simulations. For simulations, the first simulation was prepping the model, and I had defined metabolic costs, and the last 3 simulations were climate change experiments with being a direct test of my hypothesis. So simulation 1, and we were determining the effect of defining metabolic costs for all the groups within the model, or only the groups that found literature. And this is what I plotted. So the gray is like the burn-in area. So you just disregard, we don't get the stable part of the plot. But as you can see, the known Q10 legend, the values that I found in the literature, and the red line, which is the default and known Q10 values, is what I found plus model. So we just decided to include as many values as possible in an effort to not overestimate the data. Finally, into simulation, we're trying to understand the group's responses to temperature under different metabolic cost regimes. I did this by scooting down. And as you can see, I compared mesopelagic squid, so mid-level species, with big-eye tuna, so top-level predator. And there's an inverse effect. So mesopelagic squids biomass decreases with this temperature effect, but actually increase. This is interesting, but we attribute it to the fact that some prey and predator groups can outcompete each other, which availability and we felt different at different levels in the food web. Simulation 3, forecasting the effect.
Jake, we've lost your sound entirely now. Jake, we've lost your sound entirely. So I'm sorry, we're gonna have to cut you off. If we have some time at the end, we can try to come back. I'm so sorry. Maybe. So what I'm gonna do to keep us on time is turn it over to Jim. You did a great job. I'm so sorry about the technological difficulties there, Jake. Go ahead, Jim. Jim? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Are you asking for Jim?
Yes, I can see him, but Jim Ruzica, can you say a few words?
Oh, hello. Yeah, sorry you got cut off there, Jake. Yeah. Well, first, it's been a pleasure having Jake join us this summer. First, on the cruise, he was a valuable part of the cruise, working both on the deck, processing the samples in the lab, and organizing organizing all of our field notes. And then second, working on the model, I was really impressed how fast, he was able to actually pick up running the model and designing all of his own simulations, starting while between stations while we were at sea, which is also a difficult task when you're exhausted at the end of the day, or days that last up to 24 hours long. Finally, this project that Jake's part of, this is the first time that we've actually applied any sort of temperature physiology in this model. So this has been a groundbreaking step in the development of this ecosystem model, and he continues with myself and Jess Vandergrint in developing this model, and Jess Vandergrint's interest in developing a model to look at the future impacts of deep sea mining in the Oceanic Pacific. But yeah, I'd just like to say it's been a pleasure to have Jake on board.
Yeah, clearly you were doing tremendous work there, and I'm so sorry for the technology fails. It is a long-standing COVID issue, isn't it? So I'm going to move us on to keep us on time to Haley Flanagan. She was also with SOD like Malia, and she worked on empirical assessments of remotely sensed beach slopes.
Okay. Oh wait, I don't think I shared my face. Hold on. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
In here.
Yeah, okay, good. Hello, everybody. My name is Haley Flanagan, and today I will be presenting my project titled Empirical Assessment of Remotely Sensed Beach Slopes. Although the rate of local long-term sea level rise in Hawaii is presently mild, it can reach 8 millimeters a year during the second half of the century, which would actually exceed the global mean sea level rise rate. So it is important that we understand the impact of sea level rise on Hawaii's beaches. To help do that, the Climate Resilience Initiative at the University of Hawaii at Manoa is working on implementing Cosmos Coast, which is a model that will project shoreline erosion hazard resulting from sea level rise. The aspect I looked at was beach slopes. So the beach slope is defined as the slope of the beach between the top of the berm crest to the depth of closure. And the depth of closure is the depth where sediment transport is no longer happening or is happening very little. In Cosmos, the beach slope is used for the Bruin rule, which is a formula for estimating the magnitude of shoreline retreat in response to changing sea levels. The issue with beach slope data is that there is a lack of data, so the objective of our study is to figure out what the best method for obtaining slopes for Cosmos Coast is. So we are focusing on 4 sites around Oahu that are representative of each side of the island. So on the south, we have Waikiki Beach, and then in the north is Keiki Beach, then Waimanalo Beach on the east, and then Maili Beach on the west. The methods that we are going to be testing are pre-existing USGS beach profiles, RTK GPS, and drone. So from 1994 to 1999, the USGS surveyed 42 sites around Oahu, and here's an example plot of the profiles that they generated, and from this plot we can calculate the beach slope from the berm crest to the depth of closure. Now getting into new field work, RTK is a method of surveying that provides very good accuracy, about, like, I think it's centimeter accuracy. So we have a base station, which we know the precise location of, and then we have a receiver on a stadio rod, which we use to collect points. So at each beach, we walked along 10 transects, taking elevation points from the RTK, and then from that, we could plot them to make a beach profile shown here. So we measure the beach slope from the top of the berm crest to the depth of closure, and unfortunately we couldn't go all the way to the depth of closure with our surveying method because the GPS receiver can't get wet, but we knew the depth of closure from the USGS profile data. So we plotted that, and then we fit a line of best fit to it, and then the slope of this line of the line of best fit, which in this case is 0.0499, is the slope of our beach. So now moving on to drone. At each beach, we place 10 smart targets on the sand, and smart targets are targets that have exact GPS coordinates that we can use to georeference the drone imagery to. So the drone takes overlapping images, and from that, it can create a 3D point cloud. And the point clouds are just points in 3D space. And here's an example of one for Waikiki Beach. And then from that 3D point cloud, a digital elevation model can be created. And then from that digital elevation model, we can extract points along the transects. We can extract elevation values along points along the transects in order to create a beach profile very similar to the one that the RTK produced. But the issue with drone is that we can't survey the seafloor. So just like for RTK, we just use the depth of closure value provided by the USGS data. So now moving on to results. The issue with the USGS profile data is that they only surveyed along one transect at each beach. So this is a plot showing the slope generated from the RTK data along each transect at Keiki Beach. So as you can see, the slope varies a lot along the shore. So one transect does not really represent the entire beach, so we're not going to use the USGS beach profiles for Cosmos. Plus, there's no new data being produced. So now we're down to RTK GPS and drone. The issue with RTK GPS is that it's very timely to do and very labor intensive. So if we could use drone instead, that would be great. So we compared RTK slopes, which is on the x-axis, to drone slopes. So this is just an XY plot of both of the slopes, and each point represents a the slope value of a transect for a specific beach, which is color-coded. So the R-squared value is called the coefficient of determination, and this tells you how correlated two things are to each other. So the R-squared value for the RTK slopes and drone slopes is 0.85, which means that they are well correlated. Another thing that we have to consider, though, is that we only got to survey each beach one time, but this is a plot from the USGS surveys showing the different slopes throughout time, and as you can see, the slope can vary a lot throughout time, so one survey isn't that representative of the slopes that we should input into Cosmos. So to conclude, drone provides the best slope estimate for Cosmos Coast because it's both accurate and it's quicker to do than the RTK surveys. So next, we hope to survey more beaches multiple times a year so that we can get the best slope values to input into the Cosmos Coast model, because we want this model to be very good because communities are going to use this model to plan with. And I would like to thank Dr. Kimberly Lowe and Dr. Chip Fletcher for all of their support and guidance throughout this internship. And I would like to thank Noah Hollings for funding. And a big shout out to Anna and Cami for all of their help with these surveys. I seriously couldn't have done it without them. And shout out to Christian for helping me with all the equipment, and to all of the Noah Hollings scholars who I became very good friends with. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Haley? Was it difficult to conduct surveys on such a crowded beach like Waikiki?
Yeah, we actually went at 6 a.m. to avoid that, but even as we were doing it, people were starting to come in, and it was difficult. Like, we kept on asking people to move because they were sitting like right where our transect was. But other than Waikiki, all the rest of them were easy to survey.
Any more questions? So I'll ask a question. You said that going obviously into the water is was not possible. Do you have any data sources that you plan on linking your beach data so you can maybe predict sea level rise, the inundation rates, and where the water will go? Do you have any? Did you look at any of those data sources and being able to link the shore to the seafloor?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We were actually looking into using LiDAR data because that could survey the seafloor. But the issue with the LiDAR data is that there's only, they only do it like every 10 or so years, and it's very expensive to do. So that's why we didn't look at that. But maybe we could use like the data points that they got for the seafloor and try and input that into the RTK and the drone data, which I think would be interesting to see.
Absolutely. I wonder, as things get smaller and lighter, maybe they'll have a little LiDAR thing you can put on a drone that would allow those to link up seamlessly. But that's probably
Yeah, they
a
actually
little down the road. Oh,
They
sorry,
actually
go ahead.
do have like a LiDAR thing that you could put on a drone, except for that, it doesn't survey the seafloor. It kind of works the same way the drone does, but a bit more accurate.
That's so interesting. Any more questions? All right. Well, once again, oh wait, Kimberly, I'm so sorry. Kimberly, please say wonderful things about your awesome student here.
Well, it's not hard to do. As you can tell, Haley has done a lot of work in a very short amount of time. I was trying to figure out how to say in 1 minute how wonderful she has been and how much she's accomplished in this short summer. She basically has finished the initial project in the first few weeks, and through the insights of collecting data, which were originally planned to be off of digital images on satellite images, has changed the methodology and looking at different ways of getting better slope data. She has taken the initiative to introduce herself and become part of a really strong team at SOEST. And I have to give credit to Chip Fletcher and his crew because they have just really brought her in and made her a very active member of this group. So I'm sure it's a long-term collaboration that is being developed, and I had 3 words to sum up what she has done: initiative, hard work, and adaptation. She has adapted to everything that has come at her. So really good work, Haley, and good job with the presentation too yesterday, figuring out how do I tell everybody in 7 minutes what I did this. Good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You did a great job. All right, so we're going to move on to Eric Robinson. He was also with SOD, and he did a presentation on species distribution mapping for Hawaii's deep 7 bottomfish.
Hi, I'm Eric Robinson. This summer, I worked with Benjamin Richards on species distribution modeling. So this was actually 2 projects, both working with the beefish dataset. The first was to integrate it with DISMAP, and then the second was to use that data to do some species distribution modeling, looking at the biomass of the deep 7, which are 7 bottomfish species of environmental and cultural importance to the Hawaiian Islands. So DISMAP, or the Noaa Fisheries Distribution Mapping Portal, Mapping and Analysis Portal, is a website and kind of one-stop shop for Noaa Fisheries data, and it's an amazing way to visualize that. So they take as input, which you can see here on the upper right-hand side, points of fishery surveys, and from that they create an interpolated biomass layer, a smooth layer that you can visualize on a map, which is what is right behind me on this presentation. So in addition to this really important visual aspect, they also calculate a bunch of other metrics, looking at changes in population by latitude and depth, the range of species, centers of biomass, species overlap, as well as some regional summaries. And I know they have a lot more in development, in the near future. Like I said, it's a massive initiative. Right now, they are housing 8 U.S. regions and 943 species. The goal of this part of the project was to make that 9 regions and 950 species. The reason why this hasn't been done yet, and it was a bit difficult, was they've primarily been using bottom trawl data, which we do not do here in the Hawaiian Islands. Unfortunately, with the reef bathymetry, it's not possible. So this was trying to fit our data to theirs. Speaking of our data, the Bottomfish Fishery Independent Survey, which I call BFISH, everyone calls BFISH, is a survey of the main Hawaiian Islands. This figure here is the depth raster showing the domain of the data set. It's gridded at 500-meter resolution. Like was mentioned in the previous presentation, it uses 2 gears to collect this survey data, the first being mouse underwater cameras, and the second being standardized fishing procedure, where vessels go to a survey point, which is a 500 by 500 meter grid, and conduct standardized fishing procedure, so it's always the same. The lengths of the fish are recorded and then used to calculate biomass for being combined into one large table, as well as being standardized between the 2 gears, so that we have the weight CPUE per species per sampled grid cell. So my work here was a lot of data integration and data wrangling, pretty much working with their team, getting the DISMAP team to talk with the BFISH team on what they find acceptable in the common ground, but essentially turning the top figure into the bottom so that we have 1 entry per species per survey point. The results of this, so working with the DISMAP team, this GIF here was provided by John Kennedy from that team, which is a successful biomass interpolated layer, which is what would go up on their portal. Unfortunately, we ran into incompatibility between the BFISH grid, which I showed previous, and the DISMAP grid. And that unfortunately pushed this, getting this up and running on the website, pushed it out of the range of the internship. But speaking with their team, trying to incorporate this data into their system is kind of the jumpstart they need to move away from just doing bottom trawl data. So I hope to see in the near future this up and running, and it's kind of an internal development for the DisMap team. Then the second part of the project I worked on was species distribution modeling. I was trying to understand and quantify the relationships between species abundance and environmental factors. And when we can understand that, then we can actually predict where we would see the fish and how many we would see for the survey domain, which again is the main Hawaiian Islands. The prep for this was pretty similar. I took the data that I'd already cleaned for the DisMap project and added in bathymetry variables. They were scanned in at 5-meter resolution, but then we aggregated it to 500-meter resolution to match the B-fish grid. The main variables we looked at were percent hard bottom, median slope in degrees, median arc chord ratio, and median depth. So with all of these, we are able to start the modeling. I want to thank Kisei Tanaka for advising me and kind of getting me started. He recommended a Tweety general additive model, which is a model that's well known for working well with zero inflated data, which is the data that I'm working with. A lot of times you go out and you don't catch fish. That's par for the course. And the code snippet here is what a run of one of my many models looked like. You can see it incorporating all of the factors that I mentioned. So I have a model. How do I actually parse that down, get into something that's usable? First, I used a correlation matrix to remove redundant variables. There's many ways to say what the depth is for a grid cell, mean versus median. And there's no need to have multiple of those. So I was able to get it down to the 5 bathymetry variables I mentioned previous. And then the next step was using AIC and backward selection to then trim it down. So I take the whole model with all of my pieces in it, and then I remove them one by one and see how the model performance either improves or degrades. Through this, we decided to remove year as an explanatory factor. So there's no temporal aspect to the modeling. There just isn't enough data to back that up. And then lastly was using AIC and the R's ANOVA table to then tune the model. With general additive model, this was tweaking the smoothing curves of each explanatory variable. Results were a tricky area for me. There's no, as anyone that's done modeling can tell you, there's no one metric that tells you everything you need to know. There's a ton. An interesting thing about this model is that it predicts the magnitude of fish, not just presence, absence, which differentiates it from a lot of the literature that I was reading. Listed here are just a number of metrics that I ran into, and then the figure on the right here is just the initial summaries that I get from the software. So looking and drawing back upon previous projects, I look at Zach Oyafuso's work, which also mapped the Deep 7, but was only doing presence, absence, in a very small area of Penguin Bank. So looking at his project, I tried to emulate that on my GAM model, looking at AUC as well as sensitivity and specificity. The problem is taking magnitude, I have to map it into presence absence, which leaves a huge room for error and bias. But I was still able to get a good amount of information on this and see that I am headed in the right direction with the modeling, and it is working. But as to talking with reviewers, I think I'm going to move away from this direction and use metrics which kind of better work with this magnitude approach to modeling. One thing that will remain constant, though, is variable plots, which show the effect of each explanatory variable on the abundance of a species. So if you look at depth, which is the top middle of each image, we can see how some species, like Atellus carbunculus, have a sweet spot, whereas others, as in the bottom image, kind of just trend downwards with depth. So these are really cool to try and understand how these variables affect fish based on what we collected in the B-fish survey.
Eric, I'm gonna have to ask you to tie us up.
Hmm?
Wrap it up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I can just show the pretty visuals here. So we were able to get predictions, and these are 3. You can see how they vary for each species, looking at more specific areas, which was really good to see. Like I said, it's an initial model, so there's a lot more to do to build it into a robust prediction. And I have a lot of people to thank who helped review the work that I did. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Kind of talk for your Q&A time, so I'm going to hand it straight over to Ben to wrap us up, please. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Beth. Sound check.
Totally fine.
All right, great. So Eric, thank you very much for all of your really hard work over the summer. As you can see, some really impressive results. We were able to integrate Eric not just with the Bee-Fish survey and the Science Operations Division, but as you can see with Melissa Karp and John Kennedy from Fisheries headquarters in Silver Spring on the DISMAP side of things, and then with modelers in FRMD and ESD here. So he really jumped on two projects that have been kind of hanging in the wings for a number of years with somebody needing to work on them. As he mentioned, Hawaii was the only region that is not currently included in the Noaa DISMAP portal, and we wanted to rectify that huge glaring gap, and he is well on his way to doing that. All of the data has been synthesized. As he mentioned, we survey at 500-meter grid resolution. DISMAP is in 2-kilometer grid resolution. So they just need to do a little work on their side of exactly how to match those grids up. But we look forward to that happening within the next couple of months. And then on the species distribution side of things, as you can see, some really clear implications to bottomfish EFH, which is something that we're asked about constantly and that we report to the council on fairly regularly. So we'll be able to give them some nice updates of some work that's happening for EFH for the deep 7 bottomfish. So Eric, thank you very much. All of the co-mentors that worked with Eric, thank you for your time and attendance. And we look forward to some published results coming out in the next 6 months or so.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I know that getting a publication out of a summer project is huge, and I know that it's nothing is done alone. That's a big team effort. So awesome work there. So the next up is Nicole Adamson, and she is with NIMS SFD and OMI, and she works on aquaculture permitting. Oh, that explains the OMI part. Creating materials for public engagement.
Hello everyone. I'll just try to get the get this set up properly. Alrighty. Is that working for everyone?
All good. Can hear you and everything.
Great. All right. Hi everyone. My name is Nicole Adamson. I'm a Hawling scholar and I'm going into my 4th year at UC San Diego studying marine biology. And in the future, I hope to pursue a career in environmental law. So my project is about creating materials to better educate the public on the process for permitting aquaculture operations. So why do I want to do this project? Well, right now, the permitting process is very confusing. There are multiple agencies involved and there aren't very many examples to look to. There's pretty much only been one aquaculture operation permitted off of Kona in Hawaii, which you can see here in the back. And there's limited information available online, especially related to the Pacific Islands region. So my goals are to provide clear information to the public and better inform future efforts as people are interested in maybe creating a new aquaculture management program for the region. So my project is focused on the Pacific Islands region and only federal waters, which go out to 200 nautical miles from shore. And there are different processes that apply in waters controlled by the state or a particular territory. So I'm not focused on that, but I am trying to include information relevant for finfish, shellfish, and seaweed operations. So my process starts with identifying the audience that I'm looking to reach, and then identifying the products I'll be working on, meeting with the experts, and then creating the drafts of the materials. So when figuring out the audience, one thing I did was attend multiple public comment sessions to see who was interested in aquaculture. These are public comment sessions about other aquaculture projects going on across the country. And also brainstorming with people who are in touch with the local community here, people who are curious about aquaculture and coming to community workshops. So the main audience that I identified was people who are looking to start an operation themselves. They need lots of links and people to contact, more information. Another portion of the audience would be environmental NGOs or just members of the public who are concerned about the potential impact of aquaculture on the environment. And they really need more information about and transparency on how regulators are evaluating applicants and what they're considering. And then finally, I also want to address researchers or employees who are trying to improve the process for permitting aquaculture. So when deciding the products that I was looking to develop, my main considerations were how useful would it be to the audience and how doable would it be during the internship period. And so my main priority item to produce is a web page to be a permanent home of the information with lots of links, as well as flowcharts and other engaging sort of visuals. And then if I have time, I'll also work on a brochure, which I would distribute at workshops, or which would be distributed at different aquaculture workshops. And I might also work on a video to add to the website. Some items that we did not end up going with were a podcast because it's difficult to scan through and find the information you want. And you can't, links are also a bit tricky with the podcast. And I also considered doing an interactive PDF, but there were concerns about screen reader accessibility for that. So here's kind of my drafting process. This is one flowchart I've been working on. And as you can see, there are multiple agencies that each have different concerns and their whole separate process for the permits that they are potentially providing. And so for each of these agencies, I have like a different section on the website about what the process is like, and also some flowcharts like this to help people find out what permits they might need depending on different details of their operation. And this is all still in process since I still have 3 more weeks left of my internship. So my main takeaways from this project is that everyone who works at different agencies in the federal government are all very concerned about providing accurate information to the public, and there's a really extensive review process for things that we're putting online just to make sure that agencies are fulfilling their obligations. And I also realized that having few previous aquaculture operations to reference does make it pretty challenging to be transparent because it's difficult for a regulator who's never encountered a certain situation before to kind of anticipate what regulations might apply in that situation or how they might handle that. So it can be difficult to get some transparent information, and the process is extremely fragmented as well, with different agencies that do consult with each other, but each have their own situation. So there's a huge opportunity for a management program to consolidate and streamline that process. But a big highlight of this experience has been talking to people at many different agencies, and everyone has been so friendly and willing to help with this project. So that's really encouraging for future collaboration on management programs. So I'd like to thank some of those people. My mentors, Tori Spence McConnell and Celeste Hanley, have been amazing supporting me and giving me lots of different resources and ideas and feedback, as well as the Hawaiian Scholarship team for making this possible for me. And then multiple people, Vera, Stephanie, Amanda, as well as others at different agencies who have really been willing to answer every question I had about this, as well as Melanie, who helped me with some graphic design sort of stuff with the flowcharts. So, and I've also had the opportunity to meet with many different people at Noaa and hear about their careers, and that has been amazing as well. So thank you to all of those people additionally. Yeah, so that's all I have for today. Are there any questions?
Great job, Nicole. Yeah, I'll open it up. Any just put your questions in the chat, or unmute yourself. That's fine as well. It's a little longer and harder to type. No worries. So I'll ask a question. Did you what did you use for models? Did you like have materials that were elsewhere? Did you kind of start from scratch and really try to tailor it to the audience that you were trying to reach, like with a very Pacific Islander feel to it? What was your process in the creative process?
Yeah, so there are a few permitting portals that are available for other regions, mostly at the state level. For example, there's one in Alaska that I kind of definitely got some inspiration from. But yeah, other than that, I really tried to, oh, and there are also some like really long guidance documents that have the information that I drew from. So those were kind of my inspirations for putting this together. Yeah.
Yes, in the government, we love our guidance documents.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you gotten good feedback? Have you gotten a lot of input from those documents that you've created, like in your communications with the public? Have they talked to you about things that they're looking for? Has your work been effective, in short?
Well, I'm not sure yet. I still have a few weeks left, so we haven't published anything so far. But I'm anticipating that it will be helpful based on the different people I've heard from, reading different public comments and that type of thing. So
You have a great team, definitely.
yeah.
So I'm going to hand it over to Celeste, a member of that great team.
Thanks, Beth, and great job, Nicole. Tori and I were so lucky to have Nicole as an intern this summer. She was extremely organized. She was very methodical in her approach to this project. And she was also really curious and thoughtful in the process. So as you all saw, aquaculture permitting can be really complex, even for managers. It involves multiple agencies and laws. And Nicole really juggled that info from multiple agencies to come up with products that distill the process and mandates into something that anybody can follow. We know you have a bright future ahead, Nicole, as you continue your journey into law. Nicole was actually recently accepted into Harvard's junior deferral program, Harvard Law's junior deferral program. So those of you who are freshmen or sophomores with an interest in policy or the legal side of Noaa's work, you might be interested in connecting with Nicole to learn more about that program. So thanks for all of your hard work this summer, Nicole. Thanks for your passion, your diligence, and your efforts really will go a long way in better communicating with the public about marine aquaculture. Well done.
Thank you.
Huge congratulations on that. That's an achievement over and above, obviously, your project. One of the Noaa attorneys is a paralegal in the Supreme Court. So there are lots of opportunities in Noaa should you choose to come back. So, okay, so we are actually a little bit ahead. Allison, you have a speed talk. Allison Yamakawa is with the Sanctuaries Office, and her talk will be on Google Arts and Culture UNESCO Virtual Tour of Papahanaumokuakea.
Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yep, we can't see you. You aren't the little floating head. I'm not actually sure how people were doing that, to be honest, but we can see you on the top and see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So hi, my name is Allison Yamakawa, and the project I'm currently working on is creating a virtual tour for the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument in collaboration with Google Arts and Culture and UNESCO. And I just wanted to thank my mentors real quick and everyone else I've been working with for helping me throughout my project so far. So as a quick background, Papahanaumokuakea was inscribed as a mixed natural and cultural UNESCO World Heritage Site on July 30th, 2010, and the monument itself has been expanded since. So it is one of the largest marine conservation areas in the world and the largest in the United States. And if you take a look at the bottom left corner of your screen, you can get a really good picture of just how large the monument is compared to the United States. So the main goal of my project is to create a story map that brings the monument to the people, which is one of Papahanaumokuakea's big goals. And in essence, bringing the monument to the people means allowing the public to experience the monument without having to physically go there. And the reason for preventing people from entering the monument is because the monument has very restricted access in order to preserve its natural beauty, protect the wildlife that lives there, as well as honor the culture of the native Hawaiian and Polynesian people who are indigenous to the area. So that's why the story map will be such a great step in teaching more people about the monument while still limiting access. So planning steps, story map planning. So a story map is essentially a series of images and text that flows together in order to tell a story or relay a message by the end of it. And for the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've been planning and putting together the contents of the story map along with my mentors and other collaborators on the project. So the most important thing for me was really trying to focus on telling the story of the monument in relationship to its importance to Native Hawaiian culture, as well as to the irreplaceable value it has in conservation and biodiversity. So it's my hope that the final story map can convey that. And lastly, I just wanted to quickly talk about my experience in the program so far. When I first applied to this internship, I just expected to solely work on the project, and that's about it. But even on the first day, I realized that it was going to be so much more than that. So far in this opportunity, I've gotten to attend meetings, meet people with a variety of different backgrounds and job titles, and overall just get a taste of what working for Noaa is like. And these experiences are making me even more excited to hopefully apply to Noaa in the future and hopefully be able to get to work on something earth science related. And I'm just very grateful for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to continuing to learn more in these last few weeks. So thank you, and does anyone have any questions?
So Andy put the site where the tour will eventually live. I actually went there because I didn't see eventually. So please keep an eye on that site for when it will be posted. Anybody have any questions for Allison? So Allison, do you have a draft story map that you could share with us that is going to be on the sanctuary site, or give us a link to that so we could maybe see the story map before it's on the UNESCO site?
Right now, we're just drafting out the text and some of the images, so we don't have one put together right now. But when we do have one, I'll be sure to send it out.
Awesome. So any questions for Allison? I'll ask a quick question. What part of this was, I guess I don't know much about your background, but is this sort of communication where you want to go? Was this a one step in a larger journey, or was this like something you were doing because it was new skills and just sort of interest?
Yeah, so I'm currently an earth science major, but I just wanted to try something different because communication is not really my strong suit, and education too. But I just thought it would be something really good to learn about and to jump into like the marine sanctuaries and the ocean type of work.
Well, we can't have enough communicators. Noaa does such amazing work, but we don't really communicate it all that well. Those sanctuaries, honestly, they are light years ahead of other parts of Noaa in terms of communication. When you regulate people, it's a little more challenging to tell a good story maybe sometimes. But I want to turn the tables over again. If I see any questions, I will come back. But I want to turn the chair over to the microphone over to Andy.
Yeah, again, aloha everybody, and thank you, Allison, for excellent presentation and for coming on board. Be willing to do this. It's the steep learning curve because Allison had to learn a lot about our site and about the World Heritage status and all that to be able to pull the content together. But one of our interests in doing this was marine sites are woefully underrepresented in that UNESCO World Heritage inventory on site. So we were hoping to represent the marine environment there, and the content that Allison's pulling together will definitely help us. And I mean, it's not 100% guaranteed that Google will accept it, but we talked to them and they're interested. So it's a great way to get the work that we do out here in the Pacific onto a larger stage, and the World Heritage status is really important. And so thank you, Allison, for being willing to do this and embarking on your journey with Noaa, and hopefully as a Holland Scholar after this. So it's been really great working with her. And this is a very short, these HPP things are really, it's only 6 weeks. So it's really an immersive experience. So we're grateful for you to take that on. Mahalo.
Yeah, it's 6 weeks. It sounds like a lot of time, but bam, just goes by so fast. And a huge mahalo to all of the sponsors and mentors, because it requires a lot of your time and interest in the students for to be responsive. And I just want to say again, thank you for everything that you've all done. I do want to offer the opportunity to ask any questions of any of the mentors, or sorry, of the students that maybe you thought of later that we that might have had to move on and you didn't get your question asked. Oh, all right. So I do want to echo what Ali says in the chat here, that we feel so bad about Jake and the technical difficulties. We're going to tack on just a couple minutes at the very end of the session 3. And so please do stick around for that. And he's probably going to give us a brief run up and then a little more content. So we don't want to cut off Jake's important work there. So it is 11:30 straight down. So please do come back at 11:36. So for session 3, moderated by Dawn and with Sarah as the timekeeper. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. And thank you to all the interns. You did a fabulous job.
Okay, I think we're going to get started pretty soon, so please turn on your cameras and stand by. Ali, did we say we were going to start at 11:36? Was that correct? Okay, we're in the home stretch. I put the agenda into the chat, and please remember that at the end of this session, after Desiree's talk, we are going to hear the last few minutes of Jake's talk, so don't leave early. And at this point, let's see, I just want to thank Sarah for being the timekeeper for this session. She's going to keep me and all the presenters on time. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Hare for some middle symposium remarks. Jeff, are you out there? And sorry you missed my opening presentation where I showed the visualization of the number of interns over time and talked about
Heading to
sharks and bigger
infinity.
rooms and stuff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me, right? The talent that we see every year in this intern symposium continues to impress me each and every time. I'm always amazed, and that's a real credit to you younger folks. Your enthusiasm and your ability to pick up projects that are already running is remarkable. I'm encouraged by the relationships that you're building in your career. So the beneficial relationships that you build with your mentors and the cadre of interns that you're working with is going to carry you forward in your career for the rest of your lives. I'm the Deputy Director of the Cooperative Institute for Marine and Atmospheric Research, otherwise known as SIMAR. We're partners with the Noaa labs in Honolulu. We work through the university system to bring talent to bear to the science programs in Noaa in the local labs. So SIMAR facilitates the PISO program, which is one of the internship opportunities that are available. Over the last couple of years, most, I think, primarily due to the pandemic, the program coordinators have focused on the PISO program, looking at local talent, so Hawaii and Pacific Islands students, and I think that I am encouraged by that. It gets my full endorsement going forward. So a lot of you are potentially pursuing advanced degrees in graduate studies in the sciences, in the marine sciences, which I again encourage as part of the university system. That's our bread and butter. I suggest in the future, if you enjoy working in Hawaii, I know some of you haven't had the opportunity, you've been working remotely, but if you want to continue working with the labs in the Noaa labs in Hawaii, keep your eye on SIMAR job opportunities, which are available via the RCUH job portal. So that's a research corporation of the University of Hawaii. You'll see on there actually we're constantly recruiting. I don't think there's been a time in 11 years that I've been working here that we have not had at least one recruitment active, sometimes as many as 10. And so we're always recruiting to meet the needs of Noaa in the Pacific Islands. So just an endorsement there, for you guys to keep your eye on that and continued success. Again, it's remarkable how well you do, and looking forward to more. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, we're going to turn it over next to Nicole Simpson. She's a PYSO intern working in the Turtle program of Science Center. Her talk is titled Speeding into the Future, Digitizing MTBAP's Field Data Entry System. So take it away, Nicole, and please turn your camera on and try to put yourself in front of the presentation if that's doable.
All right, so I'm going to just jump right into things. I'm doing a speed presentation because the theme of this project is speeding things up. So here is some background information. This has been a really long-term project that started in 1973. And so the Marine Turtle Program sends a team of 2 or 3 people out to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands every summer for 4 to 6 months. The team collects census information by day, nesting information by night, and amidst the surveys, the team's applying temporary tags for easy recognition throughout the season and permanent tags for long-term tracking. They also take DNA samples and measurements and record nesting activities. And all of this is done in an extremely remote setting without Wi-Fi or reception, and a large portion is done at night. And the team's working really long hours and they're fast-paced, and so they don't have much time for in-season data entry. So the data entry process is mostly all done post-season. Surveys come back with the team and program members input the data line by line into the database. And after this, validations are done by cross-referencing what was entered in the database with what's written on the paper data sheet to look for transcription errors. This is a very time-consuming process. And so here is an example of how many different data types are collected and how long it takes for each to be entered. That sums up to 645 hours, and assuming it takes half that amount of time for a validation, you're looking at 968 hours, which is 121 days, which is 6 months, assuming 5 days a week, 8 hours a day are devoted to this with no breaks. So the implications of this is that a lot of money is spent paying people for their time. The annual reports as well as permit reports are delayed due to not having the data accessible. So our solution to this problem was to design a method for digital data entry in the Northwestern using rugged field tablets. Our goals were to maintain functionality, flow, speed, and ease, have the ability to pull reports, and still have quality control checks. We also wanted the team to have easy access to the database in the field, and ultimately we want to save time. We experimented with a few software options and ended up going with a modified version of our existing database that is field conducive. So here's the original paper cover sheet and the tablet version of it. We added quick tally buttons for missed turtle and monk seal counts and auto-calculated totals from the survey. And then to minimize effort, the survey information only needs to be entered once, and then it is auto-filled for every event that is entered into the event form. And so here are the tablet forms for basking and nesting surveys. They're streamlined to only have fields that will be used during the survey. And then here is the original data sheet for sampling hatchlings, and then the tablet version. This way each hatchling is linked automatically to the nest it came from. Here's the excavation data sheet, as well as its tablet form. And then we were successful in creating a really easy to use, quick flowing system with the modified database. Common mistakes from transcription are completely eliminated. We have built-in quality control checks and built-in queries for easy reporting. And the whole database is accessible in the field without Wi-Fi. And there is no more of a need for manual data entry post-season. And so I want to give a big thanks to the whole Marine Turtle team and also Vikram. And I had a lot of fun. And if anybody has any questions.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nicole. That was great. Are there any questions out there for Nicole? I think we have time for a quick question. Throw them in chat or unmute and blurt it out. Last call for any questions. Okay, that was a great talk, Nicole. Getting data entered in the field is a big challenge. This is a big step forward. Okay, I'm going to call upon Mary Lou to do a mentor statement. Are you out there, Mary Lou?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Can you hear me? Great. So great job, Nikki. That was so awesome. You did great. Thank you so much for all of the work that you've put into this. Nikki impressed me every single day here at the IRC with all the things she was coming up with, everything she wanted to show me or that she'd been working on. I was so amazed. Nikki worked so hard, had great initiative, came up on all these things by herself, and reached out to Vikram, our database manager, for all these ideas that she had. So it was really successful, really amazing. We have tried, I'll have to say, we have tried using tablets in the past, but never had anyone who had enough time dedicated to make this work for our needs because we were so busy entering data. So to have someone dedicated to that all summer is amazing. And in only 6 weeks, I only just was reminded last week that she had never used Access before. I cannot believe it because all the forms that she designed, all the functions, It's amazing. And she's graduating this December. So Nikki, I hope you apply to our field camps for next summer, because it would be awesome to have you take these tablets out in the field for their first trial run. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mary Lou. Okay, moving on, we're going to next turn it over to Spencer Sakuma, a Noaa EPP scholar from PIFS, no, not working with Pyro and PIFS, looks like. Title of the talk, Improving Engagement with Non-Commercial Recreational Fishing Communities in the Pacific Islands. So take it away, Spencer, and please put yourself on the screen if you can.
Sounds good. You guys just see my screen, right? I'm not sure how to put myself on there, but hello. My name is Spencer. I am a EPP MSI scholar, class of 2022, and I will be talking about improving engagement with non-commercial and recreational fishing communities in Hawaii. So a little bit about me. I am a rising junior at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I am a global environmental science major and a Japanese minor, and I hope to get a master's degree in marine biology after my undergraduate. And in terms of like careers, I would love to work at Noaa or pursue an environmental law degree, but we'll see. So what's the catch? So in the Magnuson-Stevens Act, the definition of recreational fishing and non-commercial fishing is that it's a type of fishing that consists of sport, leisure, competition, and for survival. And it is different than commercial fishing because you're not fishing for profit, meaning you're not selling fish. It's not your main priority. So what's engagement and why is it so challenging in Hawaii? So engagement is important in Hawaii in terms of regulations and conservation. And it is challenging because we don't have an accurate number of these anglers that fish for leisure. The state of Hawaii doesn't require fishers to have a license to fish recreationally like other states do. So that is a very challenging thing to figure out how many anglers there are that we are dealing with. So the importance of recreational fishing and engagement is that it's a huge part of Hawaii's culture. The native Hawaiians used to fish for sport and for survival, and it's important to make sure that our future generations can experience this aspect of Hawaii's culture. And management is critical for our future generations and for the accuracy of numbers for science. So some research questions that I asked myself and things that I will address later on in this presentation is how do scientists increase engagement with non-commercial and recreational fishers effectively while being appealing with various limitations? And also, how can scientists increase non-commercial and recreational fisher participation in fisheries management? So some things that I did this summer, I conducted a literature review of peer-reviewed academic literature, such as regional engagement plans, annual stock assessment and fishery evaluation reports or SAFE reports, and various technical reports. I also went to Mauna Lua Bay with my mentor, Adam, and we did some participant observation for some recreational fishers in the tournament that was going on and the pictures to the right. And we asked them at the boat ramp how their day went, what did they catch and how big it was. And we also observed a weigh-in of the tournament and they caught a really big ahi, which was really surprising. Another method that I did was conducting a SOAR method. And SOAR stands for Strengths, Opportunities, Aspirations, and Restraints. You may have heard of a SWOT method, but I thought that the SOAR method was a little bit more on the positive aspect of the spectrum, and it was very effective in analyzing each strategy that I will talk about soon. So my results of this internship were I created 9 strategies with my mentors, Adam and Keith, and each has their own strengths and weaknesses. So on this slide, it is an example of the strategy and then the strengths and weaknesses on like the far right-hand column. So for example, conducting monthly meetings for engagement small talk is effective, but also there can be a lack of variety and attendance, but at time of day of the week is very difficult to coordinate with recreational fishers. So I made 3 categories, and the first one that I will talk about is outreach. So this consists of targeted engagement by social media such as Facebook and Instagram, conducting once a month meetings to talk story with the fishers or recreational fishers in Hawaii, and also conducting in-person meetings at boat ramps. The second category is data collection, and this consists of analyzing existing surveys and creating a representative fisher panel and developing social marketing strategies based on gear type, age, and location. And the third and final one is labeled under collaboration, which illustrates that it's effective collaborating with Noaa and other local companies to do like flyers and infographics, and also fishing apps such as the Lokahi fishing app to increase awareness and like spreading of newsletters and such forward, stuff like that. So some restraints of these processes that I have found to be very interesting is that a lot of these processes, especially surveys, and just like getting approval, can be very lengthy. Another thing is that every audience is different, and there are a lot of restraints on public surveys, and there are time and day conflicts between fishers and Noaa officials. So some takeaways is that engagement is very important to conservation and management, but it is difficult to tackle. A lot has to be learned and read before creating a strategy, and you have to learn what each restraint is in order for the strategy to be most effective. My mentors always told me that complex problems require complex solutions, and that certainly fits for this, and that there is no easy, simple solution, and you have to reach out to people in various ways. So I just wanted to say thank you to my mentors, the EPP MSI team, and my institution, UH Manoa. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Spencer. Great talk. Fisheries Service should be working more with fishermen. It's something we don't do enough, so nice project. Are there any questions for Spencer? We might have time for a quick one or two. Questions for Spencer?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so like there's always the joke that like fishermen always talk about how their fish are actually bigger than what they catch. Did you have to if when you were asking people about their catches, did you factor this in at all, or did you take them like for their word?
So the interesting part when we at people questions is that a lot of them were very hesitant to even talk to us. I think because they were nervous that we would like take like their fishing spot or anything like that. So I just like took their word for it that because it was like a competition in a sense. So like they told us what it actually weighed and like what type of fish it was, and it was pretty big. It was like 100-something-pound ahi in like the pelagic part of the ocean. So I thought that was cool.
Okay, thanks, Spencer. Thanks for the question, Julia. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Ayers. Adam, are you out there?
I am. Thanks, Don. I just wanted to, say congratulations to Spencer. She took on a pretty difficult subject. Really kind of hard to wrap your mind around. A lot of the the complications of meeting with a group that you really don't know really what they are, who they are. We don't have a registry, permit, or license system in Hawaii. To gather data, to understand what the population is, to pull a sample, anything like that. So her strategies that she developed and kind of evaluated using that SWORD tool were that are going to be useful hopefully in the future for engaging with different fishing communities and thinking in the non-commercial realm and thinking about which one is effective in different scenarios, different gear types, different locations.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Moving on, our next speaker is Cameron Larmer, a Noaa Hollings scholar working with Fisheries Service. Title of the talk is Behavioral Ethogram Analysis of CATS tag data for humpback whale populations in Maui, Hawaii. Cameron, take it away, and please add yourself to the presentation screen if you can.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Can everyone see everything all right? Okay.
It's starting to come up.
Okay. Can everyone see that slide?
Looks good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Cameron. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone for the presentations. They've been lovely. Over the past summer, I've been doing ethogram analysis and looking at humpback whale behavior based on CATS tag data. And then I did some data analysis around activity level. So I've been working with the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary in Maui, Noaa. My mentor is Dr. Mark Lammers. Mark has been working on this project much longer than I have, and humpback whale presence in Maui is seasonal because they're migratory. So in the summer, they'll be up in the polar zones, kind of near Alaska, and they'll be feeding. And then they actually don't feed for a while. They actually come down during the winter into Maui, and they're assumed to be pursuing reproductive behavior while they are here. So Mark used CATS tag systems while they were in Maui to collect accelerometry data and video data. And you can see here on the right the attachment process of that tag. And that data is collected until the tag detaches from the whale. That's kind of what the view looks like from the video collected. So this is where I came into the project. I used Boris software. Boris is a computer program that helps you code ethograms into real-time videos. So I would take the videos from the CATS tags and then mark them with behaviors that I created in an ethogram. I had about, I think, 50 behaviors. They were either point events, so they were either kind of a one-time event, like coming up for breath, surfacing, or they were state events, so something that happened over the course of a while in the video. So say swimming along the seafloor might be a state event. This is what the program looks like. You've got your ethogram, again, about 50 events in there, the live video display, and then the behavior log that goes along with what you know happening in video. It's like annotating a paper, but with a video. So with ethogram events, we looked at activity level. This was one of the things I analyzed. This is activity level 1, the lowest activity. As you can see, the whale is not moving at all. It's in a resting state. So that's why it's classified as activity level 1. And then we also looked at other events that are more like point events. This is a surfacing point event, comes up in breath. And this is also activity level 2. So notice it's moving in directional swimming in a straight line at a consistent speed. And then we also have activity level 3, where you have kind of more complex swimming, variance in the speed of the individual. You can see a turn right there. That's also a bubble blast, is what that's called, where the bubbles are coming out from the blowhole underwater. And then surface activity would happen sometimes. So these are breaches, head slabs, pectoral slabs, tail slabs. And this is an example of activity level 4, the highest activity level possible. Rare events, but when they happen, they definitely catch your eye. So that was a breach right there from that individual. And then it actually comes back up and does 2 head slaps right here. So then once I'd marked all these behaviors, I had 20 deployments and across kind of 211 videos, usually in 30-minute increments. Boris allows you to create spreadsheet outputs. So I organized that into Excel and then used the frequency of the events that we were talking about and focused on surfacing activity level and surface activity, and then the duration of each deployment, how long it took to calculate rates. So proportion frequency of each activity level per hour, the calculated kind of average surfacing that would happen every hour for an individual, how many times on average they would surface through breaching or pectoral slaps through surface activity per hour of day. And so these are the results of that. For activity level, I was looking at proportion frequency of each level, so 1, 2, 3, 4, across all 20 deployments. I mapped up proportion frequencies. So you can see at the top, it's activity level 1, the resting state. You can see that really peaks around 2 to 4 p.m., so kind of right in the afternoon. And then you can see the inverse of that in figure 2, which is activity level 2, when there's kind of higher activity. You can see that it drops in the afternoon, which indicates that there's higher activity in humpback whale individuals in the morning and the evening, whereas there's lower activity in the afternoon. So there's more resting. So we would expect surfacing to fall in line with that. If you ever think about going for a run and you're really expending a lot of energy, you're going to need to breathe more, right? So in times of kind of higher activity with humpback whales, we'd expect more surfacing rates or higher surfacing rates. And that's exactly what happens. So we have higher surfacing rates in kind of morning, evening hours, and then in the afternoon it drops again because they're resting, so they don't need to come up for a breath as much. And you can also see it reflected in surface activity. This is kind of the probably the least strong data we have because surface activity like breaching is kind of rarer. But you can see it does drop around the afternoon and peaks more towards the morning and a little bit towards the evening. So those frequency rates kind of fall in line with the previous data as well. So again, to kind of encapsulate that into a discussion, it looks like humpback whale activity is decreasing during the afternoon, which is important because now we can inform management and conservation efforts to think about practices, regulations around how to interact with these humpback whales. So this is especially important because anthropogenic effects on humpback whales are a big thing, particularly in the form of boat strikes. So whales may be more vulnerable to boat strikes at the morning and the evening when they're coming up to surface more. And then we see this in spinner dolphins too. So spinner dolphins will actually rest more in the afternoon, so or the daytime at least. So when whales are more susceptible to disturbance in terms of sound, could be more when they're resting. So we'd want to be careful with the anthropogenic sound during the afternoon, perhaps. And then finally, activity level can be associated with accompaniment. This is something I hope to look into in the future. So higher activity tends to occur, at least from my eye so far, when the whales are together in pods. So if humpback whale pods are, directly related with activity level, then higher activity level in the morning and evenings might indicate a more dense pod. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my mentor, Dr. Mark Lammers, as well as Eaton Zhang, and the entire staff at the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. They've been fantastic, and I'd like to thank the Holland Scholarship Program for funding this project. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Thanks, Cameron. Great talk. Animal behavior is a big gap of knowledge that we need to study more of, not just for this species, but for all the other species we work with. Are there any questions for Cameron? We have time for one or two. You can put it in chat or just unmute.
I threw a question in the chat. I was just curious if you plan on sharing this information with managers, people that would actually maybe incorporate this information into rules and regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. This is actually data that falls in line with accelerometry data that's been collected by Dr. Lammers. So we kind of have two lines of evidence for some of these points of, decreased activity in the afternoon. So potentially that could be published and shared with some of the kind of important actors in those sorts of deals.
Thanks, Cameron. Are there any other questions for Cameron out there? Okay, seeing none, great talk. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Lammers. I see him on the screen.
Okay, yeah, great job, Cameron. So yeah, I have nothing but great things to say about Cameron. He was really an outstanding scholar, and he filled a very important need for us. We had a lot of this video data, and so we needed somebody like him to help us get through it. He showed a tremendous amount of self-initiative and hard work. He, this Boris program is something that he mostly taught himself. We kind of gave him some basic training on it, but then the ethogram and so on, he managed to basically create for himself. So that was a huge contribution for us. And the thing I'll say about Cameron is that he made doing some fairly complex things seems sort of easy. He's a very sort of very mature young man, and just never seemed to get flustered, which I was very impressed by. And having come from an academic background in the past, I can say that Cameron, you'll make a great master's and PhD student one day. So if you decide to go that way. And like as he mentioned, his results will be integrated into this larger effort that we've been doing on characterizing activity levels in humpback whales using the accelerometer data from the tags as well. So I fully expect Cameron to be a co-author on the paper that we'll be writing on that. So thanks, Cameron, and great job.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, moving along. Next up, we have Julia Rankin, a Noaa Holling Scholar in NOS. Title of the presentation is Cultural Stories of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary Kihei Site. Take it away, Julia. You're there already.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. My hair is gonna do like funky stuff, just letting y'all know. It comes from the territory of having curls. Okay, and coming with that, hi there, my name is Julie Rankin. I'm a rising senior at Oregon State University where I study environmental science. And my Noaa Hollings internship under Patty Miller culminated into cultural stories of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary Kihei Site. Okay, there we go. So the main objective of my internship was to create a collection of educational materials based on the history and culture of the visitor center, and then also the surrounding area. These materials would then be provided and taught to volunteers who act as the docents to our visitor center. The internship relates to important personal values of mine, which is including culture and history into science. This provides not only context, but also allows for kind of the acknowledging the idea of science that we have now, especially Western science, is not the only form of studying the structure and behaviors of our world. And then it also relates to my career goals, of connecting people and science. We have a really amazing science occurring in our world, and it isn't reaching the public, because can especially be seen in the past few years with this disbelief in science. And while skepticism is incredibly healthy, in order to move forward, we really need to work on connecting science and the general population. So background, the Hawaiian Islands Humpback National Marine Sanctuary Visitor Center, it's a mouthful, would not be possible without the help of our amazing volunteers. You can see some of them in our blue shirts here. We have about 40 active volunteers during any season who interact with with hundreds of visitors each week. Our visitor center is extremely popular, especially with tourists, and our volunteers are trained to interact with guests and share stories about the sanctuary. They shadow, they attend lectures, and do special training sessions. In fact, when I asked to be a volunteer in my personal time outside of work, Patty Miller, my mentor, was like, well, do you know how big a whale's tongue is? And I was like, no, Patty, obviously I don't. And she's like, well, these are the questions that a 4-year-old is going to ask you, and you need to know the answer to immediately. And that's what we train our volunteers to be able to answer. Fun fact, it's the size of a small car. So coming in, this internship was really open-ended and based on visitor center development. And so we combined the needs of the visitor center with my personal interests. So starting off, I worked with identifying potential topics. So I worked with Patty Miller, who is the education coordinator, looking at what was already in our visitor center and then what we could include. So with that, we kind of came up with 3 main topic areas of fish ponds, ahapua'a stories, and then the cultural importance of whales. And with this in mind, I started just conducting research. So I met with local leaders, attended museums, and spoke to many wonderful cultural directors. I got a library card to the Kihei Public Library, and then I read scientific papers and cultural impact assessments, which are assessments that are done when development is planned here in Hawaii. From there, I consolidated and organized my findings. I'm a very unorganized person when it comes to taking notes, so I have like little scraps of paper with random things, voice memos. It was a really hilarious process for Patty to watch me try to organize everything. But from there, I created a collection of historical events, accounts, and stories, which we've put into public lecture and talk formats, along with outlines that will be handed out to the volunteers as well, that they will be able to use during their lectures. So the physical results were the collection of lectures and outlines that I created for the volunteers. And I wouldn't say that there's new findings, but new connections made instead, furthering Noaa's engagement and then also enhancing the knowledge of historical and cultural events and stories. And this connection will hopefully allow visitors to better understand the sanctuary, Hawaiian culture, and their responsibility to land and the environment. And these lectures also help to ground the visitor center in the local history and culture, allowing for us to belong as we are seen. In summary, I created 6 lectures with accompanying outlines. And so these are the titles of the lectures. Ko'ia'ia Fish Pond is based on the fish pond at the beach of the visitor center. It describes the needs for fish ponds, specifically how Ko'ia'ia was built, who built it, how it functioned, the current happenings with it, and then a bunch of other stories gathered about our fish pond. Fish ponds across Hawaii describe different kinds of fish ponds used by Hawaiians, the maintenance, productivity, and balance that it took to cultivate and maintain them, and also the spirits related to these fish ponds. Cultural significance of whales is exactly what it sounds like. It's a little talk based on, obviously, the origins of whales through the Kumulipu, which is the Hawaiian creation chant, as well as how humpback whales embody different Hawaiian beliefs. What is an ahapua'a talks about the land division system in Hawaii. So starts off by teaching that an ahapua'a is a type of land division that extends from the high uplands to the seashore and into the ocean, and how this impacted resource use. Hawaiians in Ka'onaulu ahapua'a is a talk based on our ahapua'a, so where the visitor center is located, and the ancient Hawaiians and their practices here until the arrival of sailors, whalers, and Europeans. And the arrival of newcomers is actually about those sailors, whalers, and Europeans, starting in about the 1800s and then goes until present day, explaining how land has been used and developed and the implications of these actions. So my work reinforces the importance of historical and cultural context and stories and Noaa engagement, strengthening the connection between inclusion and scientific innovation. Diversity tends towards creativity and innovation, which are two things we desperately need to create better solutions to climate disasters and furthering conservation. Hawaiian culture is also based on direct relationship with the environment, the same environment which the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary protects. Thus, incorporating cultural stories in the development of visitor education is crucial as they illuminate the importance of conservation and sustainability. So it would be amazing to include historical and cultural teachings of other marine sanctuaries and reserves in their own visitor centers and education programs for these reasons. Personally, this experience has cemented my passion for education and making it accessible and connecting people to science. And I hope to continue on with a career in Noaa and attend graduate school. I'm excited to be able to take the time to look into different programs across the globe and find things that truly excite me while furthering Noaa's mission of science, service, and stewardship. So I would like to thank Patty Miller, my absolutely wonderful, amazing mentor. I would also like to thank the Maui Historical Society, Lahaina Heritage Museum, the Maui Fish Pond Association, especially Joylyn Paman, and the Kihei Public Library for being wonderful resources for me. I would also like to thank the Noaa Hollings program for providing the funding and allowing me to do this wonderful work. And I would especially like to thank the turtles down below. They were the best lunch buddies I could have ever asked for each day. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
Thanks a lot, Julia. Great talk. Powerful messaging in there that really resonates with some of my passions. We have time for questions. Are there any questions for Julia? Either unmute or throw them in chat.
I have a question. Sorry, this is Beth.
Go ahead.
So I was curious, those were some awesome stories. Were there stories that you just didn't quite get around to finishing, or were like, I don't know, stories that you wanted to tell and didn't get to?
Yeah, so I was originally going to do a section on weaving too, and then it kind of just came to be a thing where, so my work is really relational, and so I had certain things that I would need from certain people. Joylyn, who is part of the Maui Fish Pond Association and is one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life, was working on creating weaving videos that we could show our volunteers and thus have them help kids with. And we didn't get those videos in time to actually include them in here, but there's something that's coming. But it was crazy, the amount of material, and there are a lot of things that it's like, oh, this one person said this, but this person says something a little bit different. And so you have to make the judgment call of not being able to include that because your sources don't back each other up. Which was definitely the hardest part of this, is having these facts and then having separate facts that kind of go against it. And these are two different scholars, and okay, we're just gonna put them both down then.
Thanks,
really
Julia.
great work. Thank you.
Any more questions for Julia? You have a lot of nice compliments in chat. Be sure to check them out. Last call for questions. Oh, there is a question from Kimberly Lowe. What about engagement of hula halau on Maui, the keepers of many stories?
Yeah, so I actually did not engage with them. That's something that if I had more time, I would definitely have loved to do. I was kind of thrown the amount of resources is what it was. Is it was like I only have one Google and like one brain and one computer, and so it definitely was a really tricky thing of being able to sort out what I was going to use with the amount of time that I had, and what I was just going to have to not touch.
Got it. Thanks. Thanks for the question, Kimberly. Okay, we're going to move on now to Patty Miller.
Yeah, thank you. And Julie, great presentation there. And yes, I did make her learn the whale facts if she was going to be part of it. So, and a whale's tongue is as big as a small car for any of you that don't know that. So, but this project has been a great one that Julia took on here that, you know, our main focus has always been the whales, and that's where we put a lot of our energy. And we need to do more with the cultural aspect of things, especially because of right where we are. Those of you who haven't been here, we are located right on a fish pond. The fish pond is not a working fish pond because of the location, but is used as an educational, cultural site. And so our volunteers are our program. They run our visitor center. So we have several in there all day long, every day. And their job is to interact with the tourists. And it's one thing that highlights our area is that they do tell stories. They are able to talk to people, and people will stay forever and talk to them. And to come up with new stories was the reason for doing this, and new things that they could talk about. I've been very amazed and impressed with the different things that Julia's taught me about the area here and things that I didn't know. There's a lot of stories that are out there, and I know it's just a start of what we're doing, but will really enhance what our program is here. We have just recently, during COVID, we got a grant and we built a hallway actually on our grounds here, so that gives us a place to have volunteers and elders sit and tell stories to folks as they come in and teach them weaving. So we're trying to expand the program of what's there. So Julia's project not only was something that was good for her to do and to learn about, but definitely is going to be something that's going to be of great advantage to what we can use here at the site, which is great. And so really appreciate all of her energy and her patience with us. As like one thing I kept saying to her is, you got to consider the sources, and you got to say, you know, there's different opinions about different things. So that goes with a lot of stuff that what we do. So, but Julia, great job, and thank you. And all of you need to come to Maui and visit. But thanks, guys.
Thanks, Patty.
Thanks for hosting this.
Nice seeing you again.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on next to Andy Ledoux, Hollings Prep Program, working with Fisheries Service Regional Office, I believe. Presentation titled Sustainable Fishing and Seafood Labeling in Hawaii. Take it away, Andy.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry, I was having some issues with sharing screen. Okay. Oh, do you know what? It's not allowing me to share screen. Do you think that I uploaded it to the folder earlier? Could someone share it? I don't know why it's not letting me.
Allie, do you have it ready to share?
Yeah, give me just a sec.
So
then
sorry
just
about
cue
that.
us
It
when
was
you
working
want to show the
earlier, but I
links.
don't know why it's not. Great, thank you.
Okay, take it away, Andy.
Okay. Aloha kako. My name is Andy Ledoux. I'm interning with the Hollings Preparation Program, doing a project on sustainable fishing and seafood marketing here in Hawaii, and my mentors are Keith Kamikawa and Jonna Young. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in Kapolei on Oahu. I grew up surfing and hiking, which is what introduced me to environmental science and what pursued me to follow a career path. I graduated from Kapolei High School back in 2021, and I'm currently attending the University of Hawaii at Manoa, studying natural resources and environmental management, also known as NREM. And prior to this, I worked at Malama Learning Center doing native forest restoration and wetland restoration, as well as working in a native plant nursery. So, just a little bit of details about the project. The Sustainable Fishing and Seafood Labeling Project is a collaboration between Noaa and Conservation International, also known as CI. And the need for this project stems from the fact that Hawaii imports roughly 50% of its seafood, even though we are on an island, and that businesses like grocery stores and restaurants are also not always transparent with consumers about the origins of the seafood they're purchasing. So my work on this project includes a lot of research, primarily researching corporations' public commitments to sustainable seafood, visiting grocery stores and markets to evaluate the transparency of their seafood selection. I'm also surveying customers on their seafood preferences and interviewing professionals in the fisheries and seafood marketing field. So the first part of my research dealt with corporations and public commitments. So a lot of large companies like restaurant chains, hospitality groups, and grocery stores have made commitments to sustainable seafood, but there's little to no research on how they apply these commitments in Hawaii. And a lot of their commitments deal solely with sustainability certifications or labels and not necessarily where they're sourcing their seafood from. So I researched the general commitments of these companies, and then I analyzed further articles and websites, and also like dug deep into menus and like looking at how they advertise something on a menu or in a store to see how they tailor these commitments to Hawaii. And then I compiled all of this into a literature review matrix, which is kind of like how I'm keeping track of what commitments every company has. So another stage of my project was looking at marketing in grocery stores and seafood markets. So the seafood marketing industry lacks a lot of transparency for the consumers. So consumers don't really know where their seafood is coming from. And this is really evident in like the origins of seafood being written in very small print on labels. And there's a lack of regulation around the use of the word local. So a restaurant could put local mahi-mahi on their menu, but that mahi-mahi could be from Mexico because there's no repercussions for the labeling seafood with the word local. And there's also an excess of third-party sustainability certifications. So there's so many sustainability certifications out there now that it's hard to know which ones are legitimate. So I visited 6 of the main grocery stores and markets that sell seafood, and I was taking note of, are there any sustainability certifications on the packaging? Is there any local seafood, or is it labeled as local? Is wild-caught seafood labeled as wild-caught? Is farmed seafood advertised as farmed? And are the origins of the fish clearly stated? So another stage of my project that I'm currently doing is a consumer survey. It's going to be more small scale because it's only going to go out to Noaa employees because we don't have the time to go through all the like verification processes with the paperwork. But since consumers are the people spending the money that funds the seafood market, it's really important to see their perspective and their preferences. So I created a survey for consumers to share how often they consume seafood, where they get it from, like if they're going to the store or if they're catching it themselves or they're receiving it as a gift, what types they enjoy to consume, and their attitude and attention towards sustainable and local seafood. So are you willing to pay more for local seafood? Do you pay attention to where your seafood comes from? And are you paying attention to like any sustainable certifications that may be on the packaging? And then lastly, I'm also in the stage of doing interviews. So to get a better understanding from professional perspectives in like the industry, I'm interviewing a bunch of people who work in sustainable fishing or seafood labeling. So this includes chefs, fishermen, Noaa employees, Conservation International employees, local IA employees, seafood market managers, everything like that, fish auction, like anyone. And I've currently interviewed an aquacultural specialist and a senior director for Conservation International's Oceans Department, and I have more interviews set up in the coming weeks. So since the project, I'm only about halfway through the internship at this time. So in the coming weeks, that's mainly going to include conducting the majority of the interviews. Hopefully, I'm hoping to do 5 to 10 more just to get a really broad range of perspectives. And then I'll be editing my literature review matrix because I'd like for it to be more of a resource for customers instead of having to do a bunch of research on your own to find out how companies are implementing sustainable seafood in Hawaii. It would be more of like a one-stop shop, and it's very like concise and everything. I also need to send out my consumer survey hopefully at the end of this week, and then I'll be compiling and the research from each stage of the project to compare and contrast the information and hopefully be able to understand how Hawaii can improve at sourcing more local and sustainable seafood. And I just want to thank my mentors, Keith Komikawa and Jonna Young. They've been very helpful. I send them emails like several times every day with lots of questions. And they're always very timely and very like willing to get on a Google Meet and help me out. So it's really been awesome. I've really enjoyed myself thus far. And if you have any questions, I'm open to that. And you can also contact me. I left my email there. Thank you, Ali, for sharing the slides.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Great talk. And yeah, thanks, Ali. This topic is one of my favorite ones, probably local Hawaii seafood. Excellent topic to study. Are there any questions for Andy? I think we have time for one. Throw it in chat or just unmute. Okay, we see a question from Krista. In addition to your literature review approach, how else are you thinking of sharing this information? Social media, traditional media?
Honestly, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into it, but I am going to be working on the literature review as well as like making a final report. And then I'm just going to kind of put it up to Keith and Jonna because Keith is kind of the Noaa side of things and then Jonna is Conservation International. And she does a lot of their social media work over there and a lot of their communications work. So since we're like Noaa and CI are co-heads on this project, whatever they'd like to like advertise the work with, I'm happy to just help and be a resource.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Komikawa next. Keith, are you out there?
Yep. Thanks, Don. Can you hear me okay? Cool. Yeah, so John and I were super lucky to have Andy with us for this summer. And like she said, she's only halfway through her project. So she's already done a ton of work and we're looking forward to the second half of her internship. And she's been super driven, super disciplined. We've given her a ton of work and she basically is always asking for more. So she's keeping us on our toes. And credit to CI, they're the brainchild behind this project. So I'm actually learning a ton. So Andy's actually the one teaching me. And yeah, she talked about the interviews that she has started. And so I'd even reach out to the folks on this call if this is something like Don, you said you're interested in. I'd say reach out to Andy and can schedule an interview with her. And then she hinted at this, done a really great job at balancing kind of the priorities and restrictions between having a nonprofit and a federal organization. Being her mentors, there are some challenges there, and she's been navigating that expertly. And yeah, we're looking forward to what's coming up next. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Keith. And will do, but only if you give me another container of your Lomi OEO poke. Up next, we have Eliza Taylor, Halling Scholar with Science Center Protected Species Division. Title of the presentation is Evaluation of Multiple Algorithms for Automated Whistle Detection Using False Killer Whales. Take it away, Eliza, and please add yourself to the presentation if possible.
Hi, can you hear me all right and see my screen?
We can hear you and see your screen, yes.
Okay, perfect. So my name's Eliza Taylor. I'm an ocean engineering student at the University of Rhode Island and a Halling Scholar. And this summer, I worked under the guidance of Jennifer McCullough and Pina Gruden to evaluate the performance of multiple automated whistle detectors. So the objective of my project was to determine the best method for automatically detecting odontocete whistles, and this was done using false killer whale data. So why false killer whales? False killer whales have irregular movements and irregular subgroup structures. They like to associate in small coordinated subgroups that span many miles, so they're hard to track and see with just visuals. We need a way to accurately detect the whistle so that we can determine where the subgroups are and then ultimately get an abundance estimation. But this all starts with detection. So today I'm going to tell you how I used acoustic data to generate a ground truth data set, trained and tested a custom whistle detector, and tested the performance of an open source detector. The data used in this investigation is from the Hawaiian Island Cetacean and Ecosystem Survey from 2017, and we're going to focus on the 4 points in yellow on the screen. And we know these are false killer whale encounters because we do have visual confirmation, and they're all pelagic false killer whales. The data was collected via a 6-sensor towed hydrophone array, all from the first hydrophone, and it was all collected in phase 1, meaning the boat was traveling in a straight line at 10 knots until the acoustic team confirmed that all the false killer whales were past the beam of the ship. So I generated a ground truth dataset using Silbedo, which was developed by Marie Roche at San Diego State University. I hand annotated about 10,000 whistles. And then I checked to see if these hand annotations were valid by checking to see if the whistles were longer than 150 milliseconds and if 1/3 of the duration of the whistle had a signal to noise ratio greater than 7 decibels. Then the first automated detector I looked at was PAMGuard. PAMGuard is an open source passive acoustic monitoring detector. It's often used by the cetacean research program here at Noaa, but also used commercially. It takes an image-based approach to identifying whistles, and it identifies spectral peaks in a spectrogram that are above a certain threshold, and then creates a binary map, and then connects the peaks of the binary map based on a set of rules. And then if there's two whistles that are like crossing, it looks at the intensity gradients of the whistles. The second detector I looked at was GMPHD, the Gaussian Mixture Probability Hypothesis Density Filter, which is a custom automated detector developed by Pina Gruden. False killer whales are really chatty, so their whistles are very abundant, and we need a way to track multiple whistles or targets at once. So for this, we use multi-target Bayesian tracking. And the way Bayesian tracking works is a prediction is made, and then an observation is taken, and then the prediction is updated, and this process is repeated. Kalman filtering is a special kind of Bayesian filter where the components are assumed to be linear Gaussian. So the GMPHD filter is this recursive Kalman filter where the means and covariances are recursively predicted and then observed and then updated, and the weights of the whistles are recursively updated using PhD equations. This filter also accounts for the frequency range that whistles generally appear in and is programmed to expect clutter. It was required that the filter was trained. So events 191, 150, and 67 were all used for training. It's important when you're selecting your training data that the training data has enough variability that it reflects what would be present in other data sets. And then the filter was tested on event 279. And from the training data, some parameters were developed for this test. So far, I've explained how I use Silbedo to generate validated ground truth whistles. I used GMPHD and developed training parameters and then tested it, and then also used PAMGuard. So one of the pre-processing steps we were interested in for these filters was the Gaussian smoothing, and this is used frequently to remove clutter from detections, but it also reduces the dynamic range, which means the ratio of the softest sound to the loudest sound. So this table is showing the comparison of GMPHD and PAMGuard detections with and without Gaussian smoothing in comparison to the ground truth data set. And these are both for encounter 279. We can see the GMPHD without Gaussian smoothing has the best recall, meaning it detected the largest percentage of my hand annotated whistles. PAMGuard without Gaussian smoothing has the best precision. And depending on the application, recall can be important or precision. Recall would be important if you want to get an accurate count of the whistles, and high precision could be important if you want to ensure that you're not looking at false positives. You want to know that everything you detected is correct. We also can see that the GMPHD filter without the Gaussian smoothing has the best coverage. This is because without the GMPHD or without the Gaussian smoothing, there's more data points. So it makes sense that the coverage would be larger. And finally, the mean frequency deviation was good for both filters because all results fall within 2 frequency bins of my ground truth data set. PAMGuard did not require any training, so I was able to test all of the encounters through PAMGuard in comparison to my ground truth data set, and the results are consistent with what we saw from event 279. As a side engineering project, because I am an ocean engineer, there is a need for a custom mold that could be used to encase splice cable connections in resin. So I built this mold here, and I had it 3D printed. And with my mold design, the splice cable connections will have increased flexibility, remain strong under tension, and not act as a breaking point. So this project will be continued into the fall, where I'll look at the sequential Monte Carlo probability hypothesis density approach, also developed by Pina Gruden, and refine the training of GM-PhD. I'll also work to grow my ground truth data set. I'd like to thank everyone who helped me with my project, including Erin Olson, Eric Norris, and Jeremy Taylor with designing and printing the mold, and my mentors, Jennifer McCullough and Pina Gruden. Thank you.
Thanks, Eliza. Impressive talk. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the 10,000 manual annotations. Hopefully I misheard that. Are there any questions for Eliza? Please. Okay, we got one already. Mark Lammers. Did one detector perform better with higher ambient noise?
Both detectors were tested on the same data, so I don't have any real results from that, but that would be something interesting to look into.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Eliza out there? Unmute or throw it in chat. Oh, from Rosie Bailey. Did you get to listen to the whistles?
I did a little bit, but all the annotations I did were in MATLAB, so I was just looking at a spectrogram and then moving through the seconds. So most of the time I wasn't listening to them, but occasionally I would go and check out the wave files.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Eliza out there? We are a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'll pause, see if there's any other questions coming into chat, or feel free to unmute. Seeing nothing coming in, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer McCullough. Jen, are you out there?
Can you hear me? Right.
Yes.
Eliza, was a pleasure to have join us this summer. It seemed 9 weeks seems to have gone by too fast. We'd like to keep her to stay, continue to stay. Pina and I observed a talk during March, the detection and classification conference that we had here in Hawaii, and the software Sulfito was presented by our colleagues, and both of us looked at each other and we're like, oh, Eliza's going to learn how to use this. So we basically handed her a new set of custom software and said, please break it, figure out how to use it, and teach us. She successfully mastered that software, and she did collect over 10,000 whistles. So part of it is automated, and then you go back in and hand trace and fix and things, but it's a nice combination. And with all her work and her continued work, she's going to continue into the fall. And then now she's tested it well enough that our colleagues at the University of St. Andrews are going to expand on it with their students so that we can grow our data set. So it has had great implications on her work this summer, and hopefully come the end of the school year, we'll have finished a short manuscript with it. So very proud of our time with her here and all the work that she has done. And thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Eliza. And we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we're going to keep moving because I'll give Jake time to give his talk. Next up, we have a speed talk from Desiree Bayouth Garcia, Pathways intern with the International Tsunami. Oh, I forgot what the other I is for. She'll tell us. Title of the presentation is Advanced Tsunami Preparedness in the Caribbean, UNESCO IOC Tsunami Ready. Take it away, Desiree. Right.
Hi, good afternoon. Let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. Good afternoon, and thank you all for having me here today. So my name is Desiree Bayouth Garcia. I am currently a Pathway student intern in Puerto Rico, working at the International Tsunami Information Center. And before we jump into talk a little bit about the Tsunami Ready program, the UN Ocean Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development was established with the mission of supporting transformative ocean science solutions for sustainable development, connecting our oceans and our people. And one of its outcomes is to have a safe ocean with the aim of making 100% of communities at risk of tsunami prepared by 2030. And this to be done through programs such as UNESCO, Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, Tsunami Ready program. And to support this societal outcome, in 2021, we prepared at the office the first Blue Line for the Caribbean in Jamaica, which is an inundation extent that's based on a non-numerical modeling approach that is referred to as the bathtub model. And we basically take into consideration distance from the coastline and elevation data from the islands. So just using these two data sets, we then can get a preliminary inundation extent. And we tend to, the intent is to apply this type of methodology to different areas in the Caribbean and the tropical Americas in order to try to determine different communities that are at risk for tsunamis and then implement programs such as Tsunami Ready. Using GIS tools that are available, either programs such as ArcGIS or QGIS, which is open sourced and available for all countries. Then passing on through the tsunami program itself, it is currently implemented in the US. It started in the United States, and then it was also started to get implemented in the Caribbean, and now it has been expanded into the Pacific and parts of the Indian Ocean. And focusing on the Caribbean, which is a region that I work in, as of now, our office is currently supporting projects in Dominica, St. Lucia, and Barbados. And part of my work in the office has been to prepare historical reports specific to each of the countries that not only provide an overview of the earthquakes and the tsunami events that have affected the region, but also, if requested, information particularly related to any damages in the countries. Aside from this, part of my work has been supporting the implementation of the Tsunami Ready program through the revision of the different 12 indicators that I show here in this figure, and making sure that these are fulfilled and accomplished by the different countries in order to receive the recognition. And so, aside from this work, part of my upcoming work, which I'm preparing for right now, is to participate in a tsunami evacuation mapping workshop that's going to be held in Barbados, in which we're going to be focusing on providing training to 7 different countries in the Caribbean on how to prepare these maps based on tsunami inundation modeling results in software such as QGIS, and go with them through the steps of getting your data set after the inundation modeling to then preparing the map that can be distributed to your communities, and also fulfill part of the indicators for the Tsunami Ready program. And so this is a very quick overview of the different types of work that I am involved in the office. So I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I'd like to thank my supervisor, Krista Von Hillebrand Andrade, and my coworker, Stephanie Soto, who are always there to support any of the steps and all the work that we are doing in the office. So thank you very much, and let me know if there are any questions.
Thanks, Desiree. Great talk. And I think I'll have a question, and you can elaborate on the relationship between the Pacific Islands and Hawaii and where you're coming from in Puerto Rico. So maybe that'll be a question.
Yeah, so the primary office is in Hawaii, so the International Tsunami Information Center is in the IRC. And so our office, I would describe, is a division of the International Tsunami Information Center. So that is why we work under the Pacific region in terms of administration, and yeah, we're under the Pacific region as the Caribbean office of the International Tsunami Information Center. And also the PTWC provides the information statements and all the tsunami messages for the region of the Caribbean. So we also support in that process the Pacific region. I don't know if that was a good explanation, but maybe if Krista or
Oh, that was
Laura
perfect.
would like to say something else.
No, that was great. Are there any other questions for Desiree from the audience? You can throw it in chat or just unmute.
I was just going to say this is really so important, and it's nice to see so many people getting involved in work that is predictive about sea level change. I'm thinking within the group of interns this time, and even some of the students were trying to listen in from American Samoa. This work is so important to us as well, living on islands. So I hope the interns, at least in this group, I know you have Haley Flanagan as well. You folks should meet each other, talk story, share ideas. You actually live nearby. And I have many others. I will send you some contacts. Hope you're interested.
Thanks, Kimberly. And you stole my thunder because that covered a lot of what I was going to cover in my closing comments. Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions for Desiree, I'm going to turn it over to Krista von Hillebrand Andrade. Are you out there? I think I see you out there. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you have double mute button on the speaker and then on the computer. So yeah. Good evening from Puerto Rico. So we're 6 hours ahead of you. So we're already getting ready to close off our day. But so this is the second year Desiree has worked with us, and she just has some amazing GIS talent. And when you're approaching these very complex problems, which like tsunami inundation modeling, it just requires so much data input. But the people want to know today what areas are going to be affected by a tsunami in case one happens tomorrow, right? They don't have time to wait for very sophisticated numerical modeling. So by advancing this blue line concept, which she has presented already at the level of United Nations, is really very interesting and compelling. And we want to expand that to other hazards. So she's great. She's super smart. She really dominates these tools. And that's why I selected her to be a trainer for us in Barbados at this upcoming event that we have in Barbados. So she's out. She's going to be graduating soon, and she's looking for an office that could take good advantage of somebody with GIS talent. So physical scientist position that might be open somewhere in Noaa. She's available to go, I think, anywhere. So yep. So I just want to wish her all the best as she wraps up her master's degree and looks for a career, and would be fantastic for all of us if she landed in Noaa.
Thanks, Krista. Thanks, Desiree. Enjoy your evenings, and thank you for joining us from across, I was going to say across the ocean, but that doesn't really cover it. It's more than that. Okay, up next, we're going to hear the last 2 to 3 minutes of Jake Snyder's talk. So when Jake, you're ready, please take it away.
Can everybody hear me all right this time? Beautiful. Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is Jake Snyder. I am back. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and shout out to my roommate Eric for letting me use his computer. And thank you for the few extra minutes. So picking up where I left off with my last simulation, simulation 4, which was a direct test of my hypothesis. And again, I was determining if indirect effects or direct effects have a larger trophic impact on top predators in our ecosystem model. And this is the very large box plot that I made. But again, to produce this simulation, we applied those Q10 values. So the temperature-related metabolic costs, we applied them to only lower trophic levels, and then again to only higher trophic levels, and saw the effects on top predators in the ecosystem. And as you can see, for the predators in the ecosystem, generally, and the rest of the groups as well, generally, the indirect or the bottom-up effects have a higher impact than the direct effects on the predators, except for a few groups, notably big-eyed tuna. And also, as you can see, some of the indirect effects are actually positive. So some species increase in biomass instead of the expected decrease in biomass with increased temperature. So moving on to looking forward for this project, we want to figure out why some species like win or lose in the face of climate change. So either gain in biomass or lose in biomass. And in general, my results supported my hypothesis in most cases. And another future direction is just incorporating oxygen data and diel vertical migration data in addition to the temperature data that we collected on the cruise. And finally, huge shout out to my mentor, Jim, and also Don for their mentorship and leadership. And also shout out to Johanna and Ryan and John and Nathan for coordinating our Big Eye oceanography cruise and being very adaptable in the face of COVID. Of course, thank you to Noaa for funding this wonderful project. And shout out to my fellow Howling scholars for being amazing. And then this is my works cited. And then if you have any questions, let me know. These are a bunch of pictures from the cruise.
Thanks, Jake. Nice way to wrap things up for your presentation. Thanks for doing that. Are there any questions for Jake? And I see one in chat already. What was the highlight of the cruise?
The highlight of the cruise was definitely just getting to know everybody. When you spend 3 weeks in the middle of the ocean with a bunch of scientists, you're bound to get to talk to all of them. So it was really cool getting to know everybody.
Thanks, Jake. Are there any other questions out there for Jake? Either throw it in chat or unmute. Not seeing any, so last call for Jake questions. All right, thanks. And we're not going to have Jim speak again. He already had his turn, so we're good on that. With that, I think we're going to close it off for the day and get people able to go eat their lunches. I don't have a whole lot to say for closing comments because Kimberly stole my thunder, and actually Jake did too, because Jake mentioned the whole thing about people and relationships and networking, and that was going to be my statement. I was going to say, yeah, we've heard some great science today, but a good takeaway from the summer is all of the relationships and networking and people you've met and how that'll work for you in the future. And it's going to probably work for me in the future because looking around the screen and around the room, I'm probably looking at people that are going to come back and run this joint. So I want to make sure that they have fond memories of their summer and with those of us that are working with them this summer. Just want to thank all of the moderators and timekeepers, Ali, Celeste, Beth, Kimberly, Sarah. Thanks for the great job, and thanks for the presentations today. Thanks for the mentors for supporting your interns. Thanks for all the others who provided logistical support. Thanks for the audience for being here and giving the interns someone to talk to. And thanks for your questions. With that, I think that's all I wanted to say, except for the fact that among all the people, of all the people I mentioned, we're all doing this as volunteers. None of us have this in our position description to do summer intern stuff. We all do this out of the love for this whole process. It falls under the categories of other duties as assigned, or maybe it's not even there. It's something we just volunteer for. And it's one of the things I enjoy the most and get the most out of. Thanks for being here today. Take care, and a recording should be available if you want to watch it again.
Thank you so much, Don, and thank you, everybody. It was a wonderful symposium.
Aloha.
Aloha. Look at that. It's not even 1 o'clock yet, Don.
Well, I'll hang out and chat with you if you want, Ali.
Yeah, why not?
We'll do a debrief.
Yeah, it was valuable.
And I'm going to try stop the recording now.
Okay.